I confess to her that I always forget to hit that record. Okay. So welcome, everyone. I think you probably all know who I am, but I am Tracy with the Montana State Library, and I'm going to be chairing this meeting today. I want to have us do introductions, and I'm going to start with the task force members, and then have any guests introduce themselves. We are using mics today so that we can be able to talk to one another back and forth. And of course, I will have us take breaks because I know these online Zoom meetings can be pretty intense, especially when you're doing a lot of deep thinking, which is what I am asking of you today. So I'm just gonna cheat and pull up the task force webpage and go in order. And so Joy, you get to be first. Will you just please tell us your name and what library and your role?
Hey, good morning. I am Joy Bridwell. I am the library director at the Stonechild College Rocky Boy Community Library in Box Elder, Montana.
Thanks, Joy. And then Tom, I'll have you go next because you're subbing for Tammy.
Good morning, Tom Burnett in Bozeman, State Library Commissioner.
Thank you. Michelle?
Sorry.
I think I saw Michelle on here from West Yellowstone.
Was.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah, you might need to check your mic, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I think I heard something there, Michelle. You just might be really soft.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I have to turn up my sound, but go for it.
I'm Michelle Derrichon from West Yellowstone Public Library. I'm director.
Thank you, Michelle. Mitch?
I'm Mitch Grady from the Livingston Park County Public Library.
Thank you. And Megan, have you been able to join us? Let's see if Megan's on. I do not see her on here. So
Yeah,
Megan.
no Megan.
No Megan? Okay. Thank you. Dave?
Hi, Dave Ingram, Imagination If Library in Kalispell, trustee.
Thank you. And Dawn?
Hi, Dawn Kingstead, and I am from the Glendale Public Library, and I'm the library director.
Okay. And Jeannie?
Jeannie Lilligard from the Judith Basin County Library in Stanford, and I am the director.
All right. And Kara?
Good morning, Kara Orban, Montana State Library.
Aren't you proud of me? I didn't do this randomly, Kara.
Thank you.
Hi, you're welcome. Brian Rossman?
Hi, Brian Rossman. I'm on the Montana State Library Commission, and I'm also at Montana State University Library in Bozeman.
Thank you. And Jenny?
Hi, everyone. Jenny Stapp, Montana State Librarian.
And Mark. Of course, you're always last, Mark. I should do it in reverse order.
Oh, it's all good. Been used to this since preschool. So, yeah, I'm Mark Weatherington, director of the Bitterroot Public Library in Hamilton.
Great. And we have a number of guests online, but I'm going to ask Genevieve, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Genevieve Lighthizer, admin specialist with Montana State Library.
Okay. And then for our other guests, so that you can also test your mics if you wish to make public comment. And it's okay if you don't have a mic. I think we have Janet from Wolf Point. You want to introduce yourself? And she might not have a mic. I think sometimes that is the case. So we'll go ahead and I'll move to the next person on the list, which is Sarah Peterson, if you feel comfortable introducing yourself.
Oh, yep. Hi, I'm Sarah Peterson, Director, Miles City Public Library.
Thank you. Welcome and congratulations on your position.
Thank you.
And then we have Carmen.
Good morning, Carmen Cuthbertson, Flathead County Imaginative Libraries trustee and State Library Commissioner, and I'm going to be folding laundry and doing stuff like that, and I'll just be listening in and out as I can. Thank you.
Sounds great. Sharon?
Good morning, Sharon Hardwick. I'm the HR specialist with the State Library.
Okay. And Julie Edwards?
Good morning, Julie Edwards. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Missoula Public Library, and I will also be in and out today.
All right, thanks. Katie?
Good morning, I'm Katie Bowmans. I'm with Agency Legal Services Bureau with the Montana DOJ, so I'm just here to hang out in the background and answer questions as necessary.
Thank you. Nancy? I don't know if you have a mic, but if you do, feel free to introduce yourself. And she might also be doing multiple things. I'll go ahead and skip down to Robin.
Good morning. It's Robin Scribner. I am the chairman of the Montana State Library. I am in Great Falls with my grandchildren at a hotel waiting for my husband to get finished with an appointment. So I will definitely be in and out. Just here to listen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Did I miss anyone? All right, we'll go ahead and get started then. So Genevieve has posted the agenda, and I just kind of want to give a little bit of background on the public library standards and kind of how this process is going to work. So for those of you who are new to the task force, and maybe even for you veterans who have been with me through this a couple of times now, the public library standards are something the State Library Commission is authorized in law to create. And the idea behind them is basically, what is it that libraries need to provide and or do to ensure that every Montanan has a pretty equitable access to library services? There's like a basic level of library services that it doesn't matter whether you live in Winifred or you live in Billings, you're going to be able to expect this level of library service. And so that's kind of the purpose of the public library standards. They have been around for many years. We've found copies of public library standards from the 50s and 60s. This is actually an authority that the State Library Commission has had almost since its existence. And they are reviewed periodically. I'm guessing about every decade. They were tied to state aid in the late 90s, and then they were re-reviewed in about 2004, 2005. And then they were reviewed again a few years ago. And many of you on this task force were a part of that task force that took a look at this. We are here today because of multiple reasons. First of all, in the 2023 session, state aid was sunsetting, so we were able to reauthorize it, and we were able to include tribal libraries that provide services to the public. So we need to make that adjustment since House Bill 91, that state aid bill, did pass into law to include tribal libraries in the standards. And we also were at the same time asked to look at a few different standards, either by libraries or by MSL staff, just to kind of provide some clarity, or perhaps to change them to better reflect the needs of libraries. And so that's just a little history of the standards and how they came about. We invited each of you today to kind of come and help us through this because it's actually pretty challenging when you think about, we have libraries in Montana that serve a few hundred people, and then libraries in Montana that can serve 100,000 people. And so we wanted to have different perspectives, and we wanted to have perspectives from across the state, from Eastern Montana and Central Montana, Western Montana, from small libraries and from large libraries. And each of your perspectives will help us, I think, craft some recommendations. So what will happen is we're going to spend this day working through these specific charges we were given and these standards to try and come up with recommendations. It's perfectly okay to have options. So the commission, in fact, would welcome seeing options. Then what will happen is our standard practice has been that we have a public comment period. because we like to give particularly the libraries who will have to implement these standards a chance to give us feedback. And it's always kind of historically worked that when we go out and we say, okay, this is what we're thinking, the libraries might come back and say, directors, board members, and say, you know, this would work better, or we recommend you consider this, which is why I scheduled a meeting for us in the end of September for us to kind of finalize, review that public comment, see if we want to make any changes. And then I will take whatever we create to the commission at their October meeting, and it will be up to the commission to decide whether or not to go through an administrative rules process. And that commission will choose which options they want to go with, and then we'll go through the admin rules process, which also includes another public comment period. And then in theory, these could be adopted in December and go into effect at that point. So this is the we have some public that are very interested in some of these. And so the way I kind of visualize this working today is we'll go through each of these standards, chat about them as a task force. I encourage you to share your thoughts and your opinions, to ask questions, and then I will call for public comment. And Kara has kindly agreed to be the timekeeper and to manage that process. And any of you who are guests and wish to comment, please just raise your hand and I'll talk about this and remind you of this when we get to the public comment period. And then Kara will be the one to call on you and we'll take your comments. And then after we've heard all public comment, I will ask if any of the task force members are ready to make a motion. So that just kind of helps you understand how I am visualizing this process working today. Are there any questions about those logistics before we jump in and start working? And Kara or Jenny, is there anything you wish to add? I should invite you to comment as well.
I think you covered it well, Tracy. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Hopefully I gave you enough time. Let's get started. So let's start with the very first one. Define which state payments require compliance. Genevieve is going to open that memo up for us so we can be reviewing it. So basically, this is clarifying what kinds of state funding should require alignment with the public library standards. Our past process basically said if you received some kind of funding that came to the state library, whether it was state aid per capita or it was federation funding, coal severance tax funding, that you needed to comply with the public library standards. However, it doesn't explicitly say that anywhere in the administrative rules. And so we would like to get your feedback as task force members on what you think about this particular issue. And so I will just open it up for any comments because I'm guessing you all did your homework. Many of you have worked with me for many years now. Any initial thoughts on this one?
Tracy?
Yeah, Dave, thank you for being brave and going first.
Okay, well, I just wanted a clarification that maybe you'll help me understand that as the different parts of the state aid to the library, we have one component which is the state entitlement share, and that comes in four allotments from our county. And how is that affected by the standards at this juncture?
It is not impacted by the standards at all and wouldn't actually be within our authority because that is coming from the state of Montana and your local government. So this would just be impacting basically any checks received from the Montana State Library, if you think of it that way.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be absolutely sure that that was the case. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm very comfortable with awkward silence, so I need a brave soul to go first.
Tracy, this is Dawn, and I was gonna call you last week, and then of course life happened, but are we having directors from the over 25,000 asking for some of this, or I guess I was seeing is, do we have a hardship? I realize they must all have this part of that to be part of the standards now, but I was wondering if they were voicing some concerns, or maybe when some people were retiring and looking at their, who they're hoping to help maybe fill that position in the future. Is that why we're kind of looking at this today, or is there some background for this, please?
Yeah, you bet. So yes, there was a request for that particular standard with the MLS requirement. This one that we are looking at is actually came from state library staff who just sort of observed that nowhere in administrative rules do we spell out that a library to receive state aid per capita and funding that comes through library federations needs to meet the public library standards. It just sort of has a generic state funding kind of reference. And so with this particular standard, and this will help me, Dawn, because I can explain for each of these sort of the reasoning behind it. We're just seeking feedback from the task force saying, would you like to recommend creating an administrative rule that just clarifies that, that says, in order to receive state aid per capita and any funding that comes through the state library, such as library federation funding, should meet the public library standards, or if you think it should only be state aid per capita that is tied to the public library standards. So that's kind of the question on the table today. And Michelle, were you going to say something?
No, I'm
Okay.
listening. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in other words, currently you don't really have to meet state standards to receive funding, and so you want to change it so that you have to meet standards to get funding?
No, Nancy, it's clarifying which state funding. It just says state funding, meaning funding from the state library. So we're just saying, should we clarify and just make it state aid per capita, or should we basically have a rule that says the current practice?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do the rules that talk about like within the federations, that's obviously the Montana law in some place, and so is the state aid per capita, do those talk about if and when they get dispersed or library gets it or not?
Not within Montana code.
Or wherever else.
Yeah, but this is saying in administrative rules. It's just clarifying it in administrative rules.
But then it does seem then to define the funding based on what the legal opinion is.
So you're saying basically keep the current practice, which is we would just have a rule saying,
if that's what the attorneys say to do, then to codify what they say, I guess.
And I can provide Tracy a little bit of history about this
thank you, Jenny.
Attorney's opinion. It came about in 2018. Some of you will recall that the legislature had defunded state aid during the 2018-2019 biennium. And we were uncertain whether or not we needed to require libraries to complete their annual report of state standards because we didn't have the funding to distribute state aid. And in that opinion, the attorney stated that the language was state funding, and in his opinion, that included both the state aid per capita as well as federation funding. And so some of you might recall that we did require libraries to complete that annual report in order to receive the federation funds. So again, the suggestion that we have this definition of state funding in administrative rule just removes any ambiguity.
Thanks, Jenny. I think that'll be helpful for the group. So Mitch had proposed just basically codifying what the attorney said. Are others on the task force in agreement with that?
I think it makes a lot of sense and is pretty simple to just codify what the attorney's opinion is rather than trying to come up with something that they would then have to review and go back and forth. Because it seems like our only other options really are codify what the attorney said, or ask if we can have state aid have the public standards be applicable to receiving state aid, but not federation funding, or vice versa. I mean, that's sort of our only options. And I just think the simplest is probably the best in this case. And if it's already been reviewed by an attorney general, I think just codifying what's already going on and what's already been deemed legal. And then we can figure out the finer points of what should maybe be in those standards, what might be modified from there, rather than trying to, toy with this. But that's just my opinion.
I agree. This is Dawn Kingstead. I agree with Mitch and Mark, and I'm okay with it because I will be honest, I do not have a master's in library science, but I'm all right with it with the equivalent degree because I have a clinical psych degree and I use that almost daily in the library. So I do think that there are some definite other degrees that are very applicable to our profession, especially as we move forward and how much we are integrated into our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. The others on the task force.
Hi, this is Michelle in West Yellowstone. I would have to agree with the comments so far.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Tracy, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Also, just understanding which state payments we're speaking about. We're talking about the Federation funds and also the individual libraries allotment from the state library.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the consensus seems to be just stick with the kind of attorney opinion and clarify that and remove that ambiguity. And so Katie is actually going to help us write these rules. So now I will open it up for public comment if there is any public comment on this particular item. And so if we do have a lot of public comment, we're going to limit people to 3 minutes and just ask that when you make your comments, you address specifically this particular standard that we are working on, so that we can kind of make sure that we are hearing what you have to say. We did disable chat just because it doesn't allow us to go and ask follow-up questions. So you will need to raise your hand if you have public comment on this issue, and then Kara will acknowledge you and be our timekeeper. So do any of our guests have public comment on this particular standard, which is just clarifying what state payments we are talking about?
Tracy, could you make me a co-host again? I had to log in a second time.
Oh.
So I can post the public comment link in chat.
You bet, Kara. And I should say that for those of you who may not have a mic, Kara's going to post the, we have a form. You could log in there and enter any written comments. And then for the task force members, we will track all of the public comments and share that information with you prior to your September meeting. So it looks to me like, Kara, no one has any public comment on this particular item. Is that okay? So with that, may I have a motion from the task force member, just moving that we clarify which types of state funding are connected to the public library standards?
This is Mitch Brady. I make a motion that it clarify that state aid per capita and federation funding be tied to the standards.
Thank you, Mitch. So we have a motion. May I have a second?
This is Joy. I second.
Thank you, Joy. Do we have any further discussion or comments or questions? So the motion on the floor is that we create an administrative rule that ties the public library standards to state aid per capita and federation funding. Any questions or comments? All right, with that then, all those in favor of that motion of clarifying and connecting the state aid per capita and federation funding to the public library standards, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay, just to make it clear to me. Did anyone wish to abstain? All right, motion carries. All right, one down. I think you'll find the next one a little bit more straightforward. So I'm going to have Genevieve go back and open up the next memo. And this one is in essence coming from the state legislature. So what we need to do is we need to modify the existing public library standards to match the language within the Montana Code annotated. And in MCA, it will now say public libraries and accredited tribal college libraries that provide services to the public. And so all MSL staff are doing is just proposing that we amend that rule 10.102.1158 number 1 to use that exact language from the code, and that we amend the title of 10.102.4003 again to reflect what the state legislature passed into law this year. Any questions or comments on this one? Oh, and I guess I should clarify, we'll be asking Katie to just, if you look at 10.102.4003, it has definitions of each of the types of libraries. And so we just need to add an additional bullet point defining accredited tribal college libraries. So any comments or questions?
Tracy,
Yes.
I've got a question.
Good. Go for it,
What is-
Tom.
Who is the accrediting body for tribal colleges, tribal college libraries?
Joy, can I turn that to you? If that's okay, because you would be the expert on that one.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Who does your accreditation? I can't remember who does it.
We're through Northwestern.
Okay. Which is the same as other colleges, right? It's
Correct.
not. Yep. That's what I was thinking. Because I've heard Aaron from Medicine Spring Library. So it's Northwestern, Tom, just like the other colleges.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? All right, go ahead.
Sorry, public as well. May the public ask a question right now?
Sure. I actually was just going to do public comment, Carmen. So why don't we just move into that and you'll be our first.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's public libraries and tribal colleges. What about just college libraries or like FVCC? Are they already considered a public library?
No, public libraries in this case have to have gone through the process outlined in Title 22 or Title 7 of the Montana Code Annotated, and college and university libraries do not follow that same process, nor do school libraries.
Okay, so are there no tribal public libraries? Are all the tribal college libraries acting as their public libraries as well, or how does that work?
That's a great question. So it varies across the nation, and Joy, feel free to interrupt me on this one, but in the state of Montana, the libraries associated with their tribal colleges have historically provided public library services, in many cases because they may be the only library in that community. And so the librarians have stepped up to provide public services to their community members.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome. Joy, did I please correct me if I missed anything? I don't want to.
No, I couldn't have said it better, Tracy.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public comment at this time? All right. Looks like there's no other public comment. And so may I have a motion from a task force member to basically accept this recommendation to use the language within Montana Code Annotated to update the standards to reflect the inclusion of accredited tribal college libraries?
Tracy, this is Joy. I make a motion that we accept the new wording.
Thank you, Joy. May I have a second?
This is Dawn Kingstead. I second.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there any further discussion or questions? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. If you're opposed, please say nay. And anyone abstaining? Great, motion carries. Thank you. All right, we will head to the next one, which is actually, in some ways, I think the more challenging one for us. So we need to basically update the current formula, of course, only addresses public libraries, and it uses I'll try to like briefly describe it, but basically state aid per capita, the way it works is it's per capita per square mile. It is done that way, by the way, to kind of reflect the differences within Montana, where we have, big population centers like Missoula and Billings, but then we also have tiny libraries serving very rural areas like Winnett, which serves all of Petroleum County. And so the using per capita and per square mile actually gives a little extra to those small rural libraries serving large areas, but maybe very little population. So what we do is we put in the census numbers for the population for each of the cities in Montana that have a public library that meets the code's requirements. And then we also identify their square mileage. And then we figure out the population for the county and the square miles for the county, and we allocate those numbers to the public library. And so I'll just use a county library example, like Petroleum County. It would be a good one. There's only one library, and so they get all of the population and all of the square miles, but it's about 40 cents per capita would be their total. it gets a little more complicated when we have a county that has multiple independent libraries. And so in that case, what you do is you take the county population minus the population of the cities with an independent library. And then that leftover population is allocated based on the amount of funding that each library receives from the county, or that that library's percentage of the overall county population is how we allocate the square miles. So it's actually a pretty complicated formula. It's been looked at multiple times. Most of the time, people felt like it did a fairly decent job of allocating the funding and the service population in a way that seemed pretty fair. I, with the help of our accountant, Ashley, ran the numbers and basically took the tribal college libraries and used that same formula. And so, Genevieve, if you'll go back and you'll pull up the impact spreadsheet, I think that one might be, yeah, perfect. And so we can, if you need it, we can share with you the master spreadsheet. It has a huge amount of formulas, but we'll crunch the numbers for us. But basically, I looked at several options. So I looked at giving those accredited tribal college libraries the tribal reservation, and this is census data that I'm using. And then what this shows you is, if you look at the bottom, that's the tribal library. So it's showing you what that tribal library would get if we use reservation population, if we use just school, student population and employee population, if we used the student and employee population and the city population. And then I also used school districts, because that is something that we see in our counties that have independent library districts, as we use school districts to disperse it. So in the bottom part of this spreadsheet, you can see what happens to the tribal libraries when we use these different population counts. At the top of the spreadsheet, what you see is sort of the impact on the public libraries that are in those counties. Now, we have some other spreadsheets we included in there because it's a little complicated, because we went from 40 cents per capita to 50 cents per capita in the 2023 reauthorization. And so the impact on the public libraries is a little interesting in that they saw an increase in this year. And so their decrease by adding the tribal college libraries is not as much as it would have been if the state aid had remained 40 cents. But there is a change, as you can see, and there are some pretty dramatic shifts in the numbers for both the tribal libraries and the public libraries, depending on what population amounts we use. Now, it could be that we need to just totally rethink the formula by including the accredited tribal college libraries that want to meet the public library standards. But I threw this out here so that you had something to react to. And now I'll just kind of open it up to see what your thoughts are on this, whether you want us to try and figure out a totally different method for everyone, or whether you want to use one of the populations listed here. So any questions or comments?
Tracy, Tom Burnett here.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the column 3 on the top grid, change for public library.
Yep.
For instance, Bighorn County, negative 4,000. Using a different method, it's a negative 400. Using a different method, it's a negative 1,000. Which of the totals, let's say we take the total of column 3, change for a public library. You add that all up. Does that compare with the column 1 of numbers of tribal library amounts, the 2,000, 1,000, 3, 4, 5, 1, and 1?
It should. And what might be more helpful for showing that, Genevieve, if you go back to the agenda, Ashley created that nice spreadsheet. I think it's the one that's let's look at the county level. That's the big picture one. And so Tom, this might do a better job of illustrating what you are describing, is that basically it should add up, that the amount that went to the tribal libraries is therefore subtracted from the amount available for public libraries, if that helps.
That only pertains to counties that have a tribal college library in them.
Yes, I believe that is correct.
No effect on a county that does not have a tribal college library.
It should not. We were just working with county populations using the existing formula.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for anyone? And hold that thought, Nancy. And I just want to see if the task force members have any questions. And then I will call on you when we get to the public comment period, okay? Other task force members have any questions or observations or thoughts?
Question, please.
Yeah, please, Tom.
What
That helps.
is one of the totals? So total for column 3, 4, 1, 5, 900, 1,000, 2,000.
Oh, for the change for public libraries? Yeah. Yeah, let me pull up that infographic because I think it will show. And we might want the individual library one, Genevieve, when we look at it.
Which one's that? Is that the
That's the infographic showing at the individual library level. And so, yeah, it actually does totals and net change. And so that might be easier. Does that help show, Tom, what you're looking for? It looks to me like it's 8,703.89 net change from 2023 for option 1. And then Ashley did a nice job of explaining which options. So you're looking at the impact if you use reservation population versus student employee account versus college and city versus school district. And so the total column shows you the total amount of that change for the library. And then above that, so the way that we have historically just kind of separated out the state aid so that we can keep it clear and have checks on the formula is we go by federation and then by county. And so she has put, Golden Plains. And so for Golden Plains, which does have a tribal college library, there's a, I find it interesting that it says 2392.62 is the added to tribal. The net change is 2244.69 for the federation as a whole. And that would be the impact for Roosevelt County Library.
So looking at these numbers, this is Dawn.
Yeah.
It looks like the college/city population seems to be where neither the public library nor the college library is hit horribly. It seems to kind of be the middle of the road. Is that what I'm understanding?
I had noticed that as well, Dawn. And when I looked at the overall state aid spreadsheet, I noticed that probably puts those libraries in they're like equivalent to other libraries of that size, the tribal college libraries. So when I looked at the spreadsheet, the smallest amount that is given is $320, and that's to Winifred. And then it goes all the way up, and not surprisingly, Billings is one of the largest libraries. So you're kind of saying, hey, it looks like college and city population might be a good compromise. Is that what
it looks like, because otherwise to me, but I am of course not a math guru like some of my other peers here, but it looks like otherwise it seems like the other ones seem to be really the way that they're done, either the library is impacted, the public library is impacted quite critically, or the college library, where that city or college city population seems to not have the dramatic changes like the other ones.
Okay. Other thoughts or questions? Or other ideas? Things you would like us to run. We can do that. We can, if you have some things you'd like us to try, we can certainly run some new formulas and show you what the results would be.
Tracy, Dave
Yeah.
Ingram question.
Yeah, please.
When the tribal libraries were added, did that change anything with regard to the population calculation? Or prior it was, we were including that population in the calculation for the public library in the county, but the tribal library was not seeing any of that funding. Is that the way it was working before, or was the addition of the tribal members now included increase the budget for the county?
So it was the first option. So basically the tribal college libraries population area served was part of the county or local community libraries population. So we did not change the overall population. It's just basically you're looking at a spreadsheet that shows you different ways of allocating the existing county population. I hope I answered that.
No, thank you.
Okay.
The pot of money stayed the same size, but it's like new public libraries magically appeared in these counties, so it's got to be split up differently.
Yeah, I mean, the pot of money changed slightly and it went from 40 to 50 cents.
But not due to anything having to do with tribal libraries, just because.
Right. Because we asked for a little more state funding for libraries, yes, for public libraries and those who serve public, the members of the public.
Tracy, another question for Dave. It was before my time on the board, but when, as another, because of Mitch's question, when Whitefish Library separated from Flathead County Library, what type of formula did you use to separate the global funding for our county? That might be helpful because the tribal library addition would be similar because the population is the same.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me pull up the state aid spreadsheet here, the master one, and then I'll be able to answer it. Because I cannot remember if it used school districts, Dave, or if it actually just did the city of Whitefish. So hold on one moment and I will be able to answer your question. It appears to me that it is only using the city of Whitefish population as the base formula. So what it's doing is it takes the population of Kalispell and the population of Whitefish, and then it allocates the, it looks like at the point on our spreadsheet, what we are seeing is that Kalispell receives the county funding. Whitefish is apparently not currently receiving any county funding, which means that Kalispell receives all of the leftover population once Whitefish and Kalispell are subtracted. So Flathead, so imagine if gets the population for Kalispell and then roughly 72,000 of the population of Flathead County, and Whitefish has the population of Whitefish.
Tracy, would that mean that in this spreadsheet that would fall under the college/city population applies?
I believe so, yes. And then if the accredited tribal college libraries received any funding from the county, then, we would just use the same formula as we use with the public libraries, where they would get a little bit larger portion of the county population. I hope I didn't. It's so complicated. I realize it's kind of, I worry that I might work with it so often I might not be describing it very well. Any other comments or questions?
I have another question, Tracy.
Good.
With all of your work and the machinations of these spreadsheets, is there a better way that we should look at? This feels awfully complex. However, that's just me.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Dave. And I feel like I'm a little bit too much on the creative end of things to like really be able to answer your question well. I have pondered it because I've noticed that they're very dramatic swings. My understanding from when this formula has been looked at, I know it's been looked at least a couple times, if not 3 times. People were like, there's got to be a better way. And then when they ran the numbers, like when they divided it evenly, they all were kind of like, that's not really fair, because they all could kind of agree that, for instance, using your county, they imagine if library is going to serve a larger proportion of the county because it's bigger. I mean, it just makes sense. And so they didn't feel like that was totally fair to the larger libraries. And yet, when they tried to, I think, use other methods, and I would have to go back and review what they did. Like, I don't know if they used library card holders or what. It was just like it didn't really seem like it seemed like somebody lost. And so that's why they came up with this formula, which, while it is complicated, after reviewing it and studying it and trying different options, it's my understanding that they sort of felt like, hey, it's complicated, but it actually sort of reflects the realities of living in a state that has very, very tiny libraries and very large libraries, and that it felt to people like this current formula did a decent job of allocating the funding one way or the other. I couldn't think of any different ways. I mean, we could go back and look at things like library card holder or budget or what have you. On the other hand, some libraries are more fortunate than others, and it's just easier for them to have a larger budget. I don't know.
Essentially, what we're trying to do is figure out what is the surface population of these libraries, regardless of anything to do with money. Like if somebody said, we need to know what is the surface population of all these libraries, you'd have to come up with these numbers. And there's an implicit assumption that there's no such thing as overlapping service population. So if you add up all the service populations, the number is going to be the population of the state, basically.
Yep.
So, and it's going to be different for each of those tribal libraries. Do you know of the 7, it said only 4 have expressed interest? Do you know why the 3, did they just not respond, or did they have a reason why they weren't interested?
It was a lack of response, I think, in this particular case. I think at least one of them currently is without a director and was in the process of transition when we went through this process. For some of them, they may see their role as being much more in the archival arena rather than the public library arena. So, I mean, just like public libraries vary, these tribal college libraries vary in the services they provide. But you are correct. The question we are trying to answer is, what is the service area population we should use? I don't know what would happen to the formula if we said it's okay to overlap population. I could get with Ashley and try to figure that out.
Tracy, Tom here.
Yeah.
A question of the 3 tribal college libraries that did not respond, are any of them in the larger numbers of effect? Say using city college population?
Yeah. Little Bighorn College Library. They were sort of like, meh, I don't know if it's right for us. I think interested, but as I recall, they're in the midst of a building project. The others in the larger area were interested, although they didn't actually see these numbers. Yeah, we didn't have these numbers at that time. It probably would make a difference depending on which choice we made. Any other comments or questions? Thoughts? So this is where I think we're at right now. Agreement that the formula is complicated, slight leaning towards college and city population. There is sort of the question over that should we consider or look at what happens when we allow overlapping populations? Because the current formula does attempt basically to associate every Montanan and tribal member with some library.
I would favor the one that has the least effect.
So for you, it would be student employee, or are you in agreement with Dawn that college and city seems to most, I guess, be the most even?
Yeah, I don't see the full sheet. My screen is being covered by the modules of the participants, but yes, college and city population seems to be about a $7,000 difference, and to use the reservation population is about a $20,000 difference cumulative.
Okay. Other thoughts?
If I had to guess, I would guess that the actual population served by those, it would be the college in the city that they're in. And so if you, regardless of any plus or minus, like how drastic it is, that option I think would reflect the actual reality of the situation.
And Joy, it's completely okay if you're, you're only one of the accredited tribal college libraries, but do you have any thoughts on the population you serve or what you're seeing?
So the population of Rocky Boy is about 10,000 right now, maybe a little under that. About half of that live on the reservation and half of them live off the reservation. So if we went by reservation population, it would be less than the 10,000 because they're living all over Montana, all over the United States and Canada. So that population right there is different. A lot of our tribal members do live in Havre and do use the Havre Hill County Library. I also sit on that library board to represent the community and the county. But I'm not good with numbers, but I know our population, now that we're back open because of COVID, are back in the library. We did have some sad news yesterday. Someone did break into our library yesterday on the first day of school.
Oh, geez.
But thankfully they didn't take anything. They were scared off by our alarm. But any funding that we get is a blessing because we are solely funded by federal funding through grants and donations. We don't get funding from our tribe. We don't get funding from the state. We don't, until now, we don't get funding from the county. So any funding that we get is good funding. So looking at population wise, like the population, that number is high. Then you go down into like student employee, and then, you know, the funding amount drops. But I'm saying, even if we get a small amount of money from the state, we're grateful for it. And I believe most of the tribal colleges that would get it would be grateful too.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Joy. All right, I'll ask one more time if any other task force members have any questions or comments. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment again. And then finally, Nancy, thank you for your patience.
I don't have a problem with that. That was no big deal. I've got a couple different things, and some of it is I had comments or questions that board members have asked me. One of the things my library board in Cascade has said that they do believe there is an overlap of service population as far as service area.
Okay.
I'm not, I'm not debating that. I'm just stating this is what my board believes. One of the things is a board member is kind of concerned, and they wanted clarification when they're looking at and it wasn't clarified to me during this whole conversation, when you're looking at where the tribal colleges are the counties that contain those tribal colleges, are they the only ones that are going to be affected by the loss of income, or are they taking which means, does that mean the federation is affected, or is it just the county, or is this loss of income going to be scattered through the whole state? Can I make myself clear on that?
Yep, you are. Basically, if we use the existing formula structure, it is those counties that have a accredited tribal college library within them that are impacted.
Because I had the board member did not feel that this was fair to those counties. I mean, I'm not affected, but they were just looking out for some of the counties that were going to be definitely impacted, and they did not feel that it was fair to them.
Did they have a suggestion or a different
No.
way? Okay.
That was just their comment.
Okay.
And I asked, and they said, I don't know, but I don't think it's fair that they should have to bear the brunt of it.
Okay. Any other public comment? And I know we have some new folks joining us, so just I will just mention, you need to raise your hand and Kara Orban will call upon you. So right now we are looking at the formula to possibly include tribal college libraries. And so you would need to kind of limit your public comment just to this standard because the task force is trying to decide what to recommend. And thank you, Kara, for posting that about the raise hand. So is there any other public comment? Go.
Carmen.
Did I just hear that right? That the one library director on this call who is at a tribal college library, the tribe or reservation does not fund any public library? Is that correct? So that the tribes themselves don't have public libraries? Or do any of the reservations have and support public libraries as a reservation or as a tribe?
Do you want to respond, Joy, or do you want to throw that my way? I want to be respectful of your expertise.
Because, okay, so we're rewriting our library manual, and it used to say public library in it. It would say Stonechell College Rocky Point Public Library. And then we had a board who said we should change it because we technically weren't getting any funding as a public library to change it to a community library. The 7 tribal colleges in Montana work mostly as academic and public together. So when I introduce myself, I say my library is a tribal college library that does public library service with a tribal archive. So we do both academic and public work, but we're not one or the other, we're both. So you won't say there is a public library on the reservation, but it's located at the college. It's not like that. We're all 3 under one umbrella inside of the college. And so I haven't seen a reservation that has its own public library separate from the college itself, if that makes sense. But yeah, the tribe doesn't give us any funding. Our funding comes through IMLS, which does have to go through the tribe. The college itself cannot apply for it. The library itself cannot apply for it. The tribal identity, the tribe itself, the Chippewa Cree tribe, would be the one that I would write the grant, they would apply for it. But the funding would then come through the tribe to the college, so for my funding.
And I am not sure, Carmen, if that is true of all 7 libraries. I mean, I believe all 7 of them receive their tribes, as Joyce said, do apply for that funding through IMLS and then give it to that library. But I am uncertain of the funding structure of all the other libraries. Any other public comment on this issue of the formula? So I realized that I forgot to ask about the second issue of if we don't have any tribal college libraries apply for the standards. I'm wondering if we should talk about that now, or we can also choose to take separate action. Since it is possible that these accredited tribal college libraries, for whatever reason, may not feel it is right for them to apply for the funding, should we write it into the administrative rules that their funding will just be redistributed to those other libraries in the county? In essence, it would work like it does right now, or should we try something different? Does anyone have any thoughts or comments or questions on that?
This is Dawn again, but that makes the most sense. If they don't apply, it should just revert back to what has been commonly done. I'm okay with that.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in? All right, so now we have the kind of hard task. Is there a task force member that wishes to make a motion in regards to either which population set to use and whether the money should revert back, or if you wish to direct MSL staff to try and come up with some different formula options? Do I have a brave soul willing to make a motion?
How many other members want to look at the overlap?
Task force members?
Something, I don't think you can have them overlap. Because because now some people are getting counted twice in a per capita measurement, and then the pot of money has to grow bigger based on you counting somebody twice.
Okay. What was I misunderstanding what you had said before?
No, I
Mitch?
mean, I'm sure I guarantee that there's overlap between all kinds of libraries across the state, but I was just thinking that, and of course I don't use a college, the tribal library or anything, but I was just saying if I had to guess that the college city population would be the closest to the way that in reality that those libraries are used, but that's totally a guess. Then in fact there is some overlap, but I don't think you can't do that. I don't think.
Well, I would like to move forward, then this is Dawn, with recommending the college city population, because that seems to have the least negative effect for either the public libraries and also the least negative effect for the college libraries. It's kind of the middle of the road.
And would you by any chance also like to add to your motion that if no tribal college libraries apply, it will revert back, since you supported that?
Yes, please. And also to add that if the college library in those areas does not apply, that the funds will revert back to the public library.
So we have a motion on the floor to use the college and city population for accredited tribal college libraries within the current state aid formula, and that if the accredited tribal college library in that county does not apply, the funds would then revert back to the other public libraries that are eligible for the funding. May I have a second?
This is Mitch, I'll second.
Thank you, Mitch. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I did. I forgot who had mentioned it, but with regard to the current public libraries in the counties that have tribal college libraries also, that I'm leaning towards the student employee only because it's the least disruptive to start with, to give us a little bit of experience to see if there's any real ramifications of our decision. And then it can be revisited in the future.
Other thoughts or responses to Dave's comment?
Tracy?
Yes, Tom.
Yes, so I take back my previous statement. If we use the student employee change for the public library and total those numbers, they're less than the 7,000. Using the college city population. So I think that'd be the least disruptive, least visible, effective. So I'll probably vote. If I have a vote, I'm not sure I do because I'm substituting today for Commissioner Hall, but I would support the least disruptive, which is the student employee method. And I would support the revert method portion of this. So maybe there's maybe the motion could be amended.
I guess I would just share to further complicate things. I go back to Mitch's question, like, okay, how do we allocate the population fairly? And I happen to know that some of these accredited tribal college libraries, actually most of them, are in towns that are actually, like, it would be hard for people to travel to their county library to use their library. And so that's one of the reasons why the tribal college library has stepped up. So I guess I would respectfully offer that college and city population might be a more accurate reflection of the service population, just because people sometimes are unable to drive to the next town to use the library. And I just would share that. I think this is a great discussion to have. I would turn to other task force members like Jeannie and Michelle, or Joy, if you have anything you would like to share, or Kara, you are also a member of this task force. It's so hard. There's such deep thinking going on. All right. Well, I guess, Dawn, do you want to take a friendly amendment? Oh, Jenny, please go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the question, Tracy. We do have a meeting in September.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be reasonable to have the task force hold on voting on these options until September if they want more time to think about it? Or would you prefer that they take action today?
That's a great question. I would actually prefer that they do what's comfortable for them. If they feel like they need some more time to ponder this, that is perfectly fine with me. If they would like us to look at some sort of different metric for applying the population, we can certainly do that.
This is Dawn again, and I'm okay if we table, but I think that historically, libraries have always erred on trying to be as fair as possible and trying to be as giving as possible. And I understand what some of the other members on this task force is saying is that, well, this is as close as what we have had in the past, but we are changing and we need to represent how Montana is. And I think in the past, not including the tribal colleges, has not been a true representation. And so therefore, whether we do it today or next month, which I'm totally okay with, and obviously I will do more research, but I still think that it is more prudent to share the resources rather than trying to err and see, because what we want to do ultimately is take care of the people in our communities. And they're the ones that are hurt if we don't share the resources.
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, Carmen, go ahead.
Might be a good idea to map those 7 tribal libraries and show how close or far away from them the public libraries are that the funding would, that impact each other's funding. I don't have a clear idea of what the access to the city or county libraries would be for those, for the tribal members. Are they far away from that college library and they would actually never use it because, 2 feet away is the public library, in which case I would count them as a population served by the public library. But to me, this question might have something to do with physically where these libraries are. So maybe mapping them would help.
Okay. It's a great suggestion. Katie.
Yes, Tracy, I was just going to comment that I think if the task force decides to table this until the next meeting, we will have plenty of time to still have the ability to draft a rule to take to the commission for the October meeting on my end.
All right. Thank you, Katie. That is helpful.
Tracy, this is Joy. Can I speak to what Carmen was talking about?
Please.
So my library is right smack in the middle of the reservation. It's 7 miles from Box Elder and it's 6.5 miles from Rocky, from what we consider the agency where like all of our tribal offices and stuff are. The public library is 27 27.8 miles away. So unless you're a tribal member living in Havre, where the library is closer, the access to a library out here with our transit service and everything is right smack in the middle of the reservation. And that was why the tribe built it there, so that all members of the tribal community would have access to this library. So when they built it, it was right where, you know, most of our villages are at. It's close to both of our schools that are on the reservation. And so that was taken into account, knowing that the closest public library to us would be like 27.8 miles away. And that way we could service our own community members when they couldn't get to that public library.
Yeah, Carmen, looks like you raised your hand again.
We recently updated at the Flathead County Library System our look at our branches and where they are and how many people they serve. And we used the Flathead County GIS person to get an idea of drive time from the different branches to look at most likely who in the county uses which branch. And it's not exact, but with the GIS guy who was very knowledgeable, we had very good numbers as to who was probably using which branch and which branch should be how big if we assign square footage per population to the different branches. So I think that's maybe the clearest picture you could get as to who most likely uses which library.
It's a great suggestion, having GIS colleagues. Katie, did you have another comment, or did you just leave your hand raised for?
Got to lower my hand, disregard.
Okay. All right, will do. So we do have a motion on the floor, which the current motion is to use the college and city population, and if no accredited tribal college libraries apply, to revert that funding back to the other libraries in that county. There's been some great discussion and some suggestions. You know, we could table this. I could, you know, work with our GIS pros to do that map that Carmen mentioned. We could play around with the formula. So is there any final questions or comments from the task force members before I ask you to vote? Or would someone like to make a motion to table this and consider it at your September meeting?
I just have a quick question. Do we get a second on this motion after Dawn?
Yes,
Okay,
Mitch.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I would motion that we table till the September meeting.
Can you just have the person that made the motion ask them if they want to withdraw?
Genevieve, can I lean on you as a parliamentarian? Because I can never
Yeah,
I don't have to do this.
That's okay. Since it's been seconded, it's on the table, so we need someone to postpone it definitely till the September.
Okay, so
or table it's fine.
Dave has moved to table it or postpone it to the September meeting. And I believe I need a second, right, Genevieve?
Correct.
Do I have a second for Dave's motion to postpone this decision to the September meeting?
Tracy, this is Dawn. I will second it.
Okay, so Dawn will second. And then my memory, Genevieve, is we just call for the vote. There's no debate.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna the motion we are voting on is to postpone this decision about the formula until the September meeting. It's been moved and seconded, and State Library staff will follow through on some of the suggestions. So at this time, if you are in favor of the motion to postpone definitely, will you please say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
If you're opposed, please say nay.
Correction. The motion was to postpone to a definite time, the September meeting, not indefinite.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Yes, appreciate that. That is the motion. Hopefully everyone caught that I accidentally said indefinite and it is definite. Is anyone abstaining? Okay, so the motion carries, and what State Library staff will do is we will, as Carmen suggested, we'll create a map that kind of shows you access to the accredited tribal college libraries and the counties. And then I'll just ask Ashley, our accountant, about the overlapping population question just to see if there's maybe a different way to do the formula. Is there anything else before I think we'll take a break here in just a few moments, but is there anything else that you would find helpful from State Library staff to prepare you for your September meeting?
Tracy, towards that same issue that we're trying to decide now, if there's a way at all to delineate which towards that same goal of overlapping populations. We try to do that same thing with Imagination If and our Whitefish library to the north. How many have crossover cards versus how many of our county residents just use Whitefish, or vice versa? Because we have a whitefish population that comes down and uses our library. And so I don't know if there's a way to tease that out, but if there's any metrics you can use, that would be helpful.
All right. We'll see what we can do. Anything else? All right, you have been hard at it for a while, so let's just take a 10-minute break. So we'll reconvene at 10:37 a.m. and we'll move on to the next agenda item. And Genevieve, awesome. You're so good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have one or two I didn't see with a thumbs up, so. All right. I am going to go ahead and get started because I think the task force members are now here. So we are to amending the library's budget. And so Genevieve is kindly pulling up the memo. And the memo has the language of the budget. And this one was a request actually from the libraries and from MSL staff to take a look at this one. What I attempted to do in the memo was share with you the intent of the previous task force and just kind of their desire to encourage library boards and directors to truly consider the library's needs and to try and find the resources, because there does come to be a point, I think someone might have said this, when they're like, the inflation eats away at the cost to the point where you really can't do what you need to do to serve people. And, however, in the different iterations of writing this particular budget standard, it became what is currently there. The library budget shows year-to-year growth reflecting community needs. And as many of the libraries around Montana have pointed out, and state library staff too, this isn't always possible, nor is it perhaps even always appropriate. And so what they are requesting is more of a changing of the wording to really encourage the library board and director to think about what the library needs and to work with community and local government leaders to address those financial needs. And so with that little bit of background, I would open it up to the task force members to just see what your thoughts are on the suggestions to look at this particular standard.
Tracy, Tom Burnett.
Yes, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems unattuned to changing market conditions. And we might just consider the graph of in-person visitation at libraries in the state between 2011 and 2021, somewhere in there. Some decadal measure showed a 37% drop in in-person visitation. And so to have a budget that's growing in contradiction to at least that usage metric just seems awkward and and not real world.
Okay. Do you like the suggested wording for the new standard, or do you have a different suggestion?
Thank you. Yes, I did write that that funding should reflect the needs of the citizens that it serves, something to that effect. So very oblique and.
Okay, so funding should reflect the need of the citizens served. Okay. Other members of the task force? Thoughts, comments, questions?
I had some wording that I thought wasn't additions to what was given in the memo that I thought might be, I don't know. I don't like to make things more wordy, but I would add it to say, well, I just read it when I would say. Library board and director identify the financial. Sorry, this is Mitch. I should have said who I was before I started talking.
Fine.
The library board and director identify the financial resources needed to provide adequate library services according to the library's mission and communicate with community and local government leaders about financial needs.
So your change was tying it back to the library's mission.
Right.
Okay.
And to a point about, to get into weeds about library visitation numbers going up or down or anything. I think any public library director will tell you that less and less does the door count measure how busy a library is or how much services they offer. And also, I'm at a fairly large library for Montana. I guess it's not a large, but medium library. I also question a lot of door numbers accuracy, seeing how libraries actually count those. I don't think that it's necessarily a good measure either because of what libraries do or just the practical process of counting people coming in the door.
Thanks, Mitch. Other task force members, you can do it. I know it's hard, but you can do it. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one? And either Tom's suggestion for changing it or Mitch's suggestion?
Would it be helpful to, I was just going to suggest maybe if could we put the different wording on a document for people to have?
Yeah. Let's see. Let me send
Do you
it
want
to
to do
you.
that, or do you want me to do that?
I'll send it to you in chat, Genevieve, and
Okay.
then
Sounds good.
You can.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Tom, please.
looking at that bulletin point that Mitch commented on, I think it serves the purpose that I suggest just fine. So I'll retract my input.
So adding the according to the library's mission.
Yeah, in the bullet point, the library board and director identified the
Okay.
financial resources needed to provide adequate library services. That gets us away from the year-to-year growth, and that's my purpose. Thank you.
Yeah. Come, Tom.
I mean, people are always going to argue over what adequate means, but if you get rid of all argument through legal language, we'd be in a different world.
Genevieve, will you pull up the language on the memo real quick, and I'm typing in Mitch where he said to add, but if you'll bring up the memo, I can look.
You see it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So while I'm sending that to Genevieve and she's going to copy it and place it in a document for us, does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Are you leaning towards the wording and being okay with it?
Tracy, Dave here.
Yeah.
I appreciate Mitch's addition of the adequate library services. I would hesitate to use the adequate just because of the legal variability and whatever definition. It's the same as fair. It's hard to define, and so I would lean towards the original verbiage for that reason.
Okay. He also suggested tying it back to the library's mission. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I would support that.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
here.
Tom. Yeah.
I support Dave's suggestion to do without adequate. In fact, the whole concept might be unnecessary because the governance of any organization requires financial planning and requests of the people in authority. So it might be redundant to the mission entirely, but if we leave it in, let's do without the adequate because of that ambiguity.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is what I have on the screen reflective of where we're at in the conversation?
I also had between, it said library's mission and regularly communicate.
Regular.
Regularly. Now, does it reflect what you said, Mitch?
Yeah, minus the adequate, but
minus the adequate.
that's
Okay.
part of the.
Okay. So may I turn to Jeannie and Michelle and just kind of ask you to weigh in on this one? Your thoughts?
I support the new wording here.
All right.
As do I, Jeannie.
Okay. Any other task force members have thoughts on this one? You know, Mark or Dawn, we haven't heard from you recently on this one. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, this is Mark here. Yeah, I support the way this is written as an update to the standards. I think it accomplishes what the intent was, but making it a little less specific. And I think that's probably a good thing. So, because just given the variance of different libraries, different governance structures. So, yep, I think it's great. And I appreciate the comments that were made in the discussion.
Okay.
And Tracy, I agree with the revised changes. And just on a side note, I can't speak for all libraries, but I think that we continue, even with all the new technology, I still think that we continue to grow. This year we're a medium library and we're in Eastern Montana, and we had 891 people participate in the summer reading program. And our numbers for visitors and circulation from last 2022, our numbers never went down. Usually we'll have a little bit of a lull in the fall or maybe the winter months, and all of our fall and winter months circulation numbers were above our summer numbers for 2022, and we have surpassed by 1,000 for our numbers last year. We've just broke through the ceiling, and we have really had out of this world numbers for circulation and visitors for 2023. So although, and I agree with everyone, but we are busy. And I know that many other libraries are seeing all these increased visitations and increased use, not only in our online, but also in person. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Dawn. I'm actually looking forward to seeing the statistics from this year because anecdotally from library directors, I've heard many of them say they're starting to see pre-COVID numbers returning or be, above that. So it'll be interesting to see what the 2023 stats look like. So we've had some very good discussion on this. I will now open it up to public comment on this specific standard. As you can see, the task force has made some recommendations for some new wording. trying to capture the spirit of the task force while being realistic about the situations that libraries or local governments or communities are in. Is there any public comment on this particular standard? And if there is, if you'll just raise your hand, Kara can acknowledge you. All right. So it looks like there's no public comment on this particular standard. So with that, I would welcome a motion from a task force member to accept what you see on the screen as the change for this particular standard. Anyone brave enough to motion to accept it? Or make a different motion?
Hi, this is Michelle. I make a motion to accept the following change to the standard. The library board and director identify the financial resources needed to provide library services according to the library's mission and regularly communicate with the community and local government leaders about financial needs.
Thank you, Michelle. Do I have a second?
This is Jeannie. I second the motion.
Thank you, Jeannie. Is there any further comments or questions on the motion that's on the floor? All those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. Does anyone wish to abstain? Motion carries. All right, thank you, everyone.
Tracy,
Yes, Tom.
quick diversion before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Does the staff know how many of our, 80 to 100 and some plus libraries and branches do not have electronic ticker counters?
You know, I don't think we know, but that is actually a question we could ask. I will ask Rebecca, Tom, if she might know. She would be the one most likely to know given her work.
Appreciate it.
And we'll get back to you.
I'll check with her, Tracy.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate that. All right. Okay, I am just going to acknowledge that this next agenda item is probably the one where there is the most diverse viewpoints about what we should do. So Genevieve is pulling up the question, which is we have had this requirement that directors of libraries that serve over 25,000 people have a Master's of Library Science or equivalent degree. And we shared with you a history of how long that requirement has been in place. There's always been, as you could see, even within the Montana Code annotated, some reference to it. But this specific requirement has been around since 1999. We also shared with you what other states have required of library directors. And hopefully you looked at that because there are a lot of nuances to that spreadsheet that Kara put together. And I just want to acknowledge both Colette Bartow and Kara Orban because they did the history of the MLS requirement and the analysis of what other state libraries did, which I think will be helpful to us as a task force. And so with that, I would love to hear your thoughts in this memo. I kind of listed out some questions for us to consider, whether or not we should keep the current standard and define the equivalent degree, whether staff having a library degree could count, or whether or not work experience could substitute, or some combination, or if you have other suggestions. So at this point, I would open it up to the task force members about any comments or questions you might have, and your thoughts on this particular standard.
This is Jeannie, and I'm just curious, are there many in-library programs, many graduates that are coming out now, or is this not a popular field anymore?
Oh, so you're asking about the number of people graduating with MLS degrees.
Correct.
That's a great question, Jeannie. I mean, I know that there are some. I actually know of several Montana librarians currently working on their MLS, but I do not know the exact number. So that is something I can research for this task force.
Yeah, I was just curious, if there are many in the schools now. I don't even know where the popular places to get your degree from are, what they are. What schools are they coming out of?
Yeah, with the move to so many people being able to get their degrees online, I would say that it's expanded. So I know there are people going to the Washington High School. I know there are people going to the University of Texas. So we could certainly try to give you that information, Jeannie.
Oh, I was just curious, if there are people out there available with degrees or if they're hard to come by.
I think the answer to your question is yes, there are people available.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Tom.
Tom and Bozeman. I did a little research on that a week or so ago. I just
Awesome.
Googled around and tried to see how many people have such a degree, how many people are currently enrolled in such a program. And it was more than I expected, but my research was very inadequate. And but I think Jeannie's question is very pertinent because it can be a limiting factor in the candidate search. If we say that somebody has to have this, and this, or a very restrictive type of qualification, then the trustees have a smaller candidate pool to draw from, where skills, attributes that are not associated with that sheepskin might be more valuable to a board of trustees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Mark here at Bitterroot. I think it's important to note, I don't disagree kind of in principle with what Tom just said, but I think we're really only talking about 8 libraries that this impacts. This is not a universal blanket, thing that's going to really kind of make a huge difference to the 80 or so libraries in Montana. I mean, from what I understand from the, what I'd looked at, it is, and please correct me, Tracy or Jenny, if I'm wrong, but there's 8 libraries in Montana, correct? That this applies to.
Yep, that's correct, Mark.
Okay, so less than 10% of the library systems in Montana are affected by this.
It would actually be up at 10%, I think. There's 83 main public libraries.
And that's by library system, not by population affected. By population affected, that's a whole sort of different thing. And I've thought about this a lot. I don't know if I have, coherent thoughts yet. I think I'd probably be better sort of like I'm doing now of, offering some reactions and thoughts on points that other people raise. But I do think it's important for all of us in this task force to realize that, we're not talking about something that's going to prevent many libraries in Montana from hiring the people that they think is the best candidate for their job. It does, it can have impacts on those 8 libraries, of course, but I just think it's nice to put it in perspective and then sort of go down through this. So I'll stop rambling here, but I did just want to provide that sort of perspective on the number of libraries affected. It's not going to put people out of a job that are currently working in Montana libraries. It's not going to make it, absolutely impossible to find candidates, because there are a good bit of people with MLSs in, Montana, I mean, just here in the Bitterroot, there's, me here at Bitterroot, Daniel, our assistant director, the director of the North Valley Public Library has an MLS, the director, or when we just had a library assistant position open here that, only paid 18 an hour, part-time position. We had somebody with an MLS apply that was local, it wasn't somebody from Kansas just looking for a job to get their foot in the door. So yeah, that's just my sort of anecdotes and my insight. So that's what I have to share now.
Thank you. Other task force members?
This is Mitch, and I want to be mad at Mark for taking away everything almost I was going to say, but I was going to ask you this one. Can you name those 8 libraries?
Yes, I can. It's a test.
It is.
Billings, Butte, Great Falls, Flathead County, Missoula, Bozeman, Hamilton. Did I get all of them?
I think
Lewis and Clark.
Oh, Helena. Well, I
here's
live
a
in
harder
Great
question,
Falls.
but you guys have your ear to the ground. Of those libraries that have had to hire a new director in, say, the last 5 years, which, if any, have had difficulty having people with master's degree with MLS or MLIS applying to them that you're aware of?
So in all fairness, Mitch, only 2 of the libraries have gone through the process, and one of them had difficulty in the recruitment
In that nobody
process.
applied that had an MLS?
No, I think that they applied, but they chose to pull out before the interview process, I believe.
Okay.
I think one of the most difficult things right now is to find housing for anybody. If you don't already live in one of our communities, it's tough.
That is true.
I'd like to make comment, Tracy, if I could.
Yeah, please, Dave.
In that library with the difficulty. It's an and to Mark's comments earlier, and I appreciate them. There are a lot of different variables that go into trying to select an individual that fits your community's needs. Our library has 35 staff members, and we have currently 3 MLS staff, but our director does not. And so I'm talking about it in a personal sense, but the concept of, and I've wrestled with this, as have other board members, and the concept of what do we need at a certain side? Do we need a manager, somebody with managerial experience? Do we need the resources of the MLS degree in-house, which we currently do? And those are things and decisions that we look at when we make our decisions. And just philosophically, I come from healthcare, and Montana's been a state where credentials are important, but also experience and outcomes and performance are also things that are looked at in this state, and in conjunction with experience that people have, scope of practice has been expanded in this state in multiple providers because of experience and outcomes that other states don't have without the requirement of a certain degree. And I like the idea of the local area making the decisions for themselves. Obviously, there'll be repercussions if outcomes are not what they expect. So I think there are checks and balances, and that's just a beginning perspective that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Dave. Other comments or questions from the task force?
I guess I wanted to comment just because my library, West Yellowstone, we haven't been eligible for state funds. We've been on the non-eligible list for a while. I've been the director now for 6 months, and the previous director, though highly qualified as far as formal education, he declined to take any of the state certification classes. As myself as a new director, and also my trustees, one of our main goals is for us to be to go up to to become qualified for that. And we found, just as a library, that though we're very small, in West Yellowstone is kind of unique. In this year round, we have about 1,200 people, but in the summertime, we have 4,000 or 5,000 more people. So from going from the front of the library, I've had, I guess, about 10 years experience in front of the library, to now being in the back of the library as a director. What I need to know is monumentally shifted. It's much more accounting, business sense. Just it's a whole different game, really. So I'm a little. I understand the needing for a larger library. I can see where having the formal education for a library degree would be very beneficial. And I also see where background in business and accounting and other things would be very beneficial as well. So I guess I don't have a point. I'm seeing a little bit of both right here.
It's probably a reflection of the complexity of the question, Michelle.
It's pretty complex. Because I am in such a small library. I know what is important for us, but the larger libraries is a whole different thing. So where I think my background and my work ethic and my self-education, that I can pull it off, I question on whether a very large library, what they would need.
This is Dawn. I've been in the library world for 19 years and have been a director since 2013. And of course, this doesn't affect our library. But one thing that I have taken from since I've been director is the only thing that I get to really work on is infrastructure issues, which, I mean, I have a degree in clinical psych, like I've said, and granted, I know that my library would not be affected by this, but those that do have the degrees, do they teach stuff like taking care of infrastructure in those MS degrees or maintenance? I mean, that seems to be, of course, you guys have bigger budgets, but that seems to be that and behavioral issues, the uptick of mental health issues that I deal with on a daily basis, and it's daily anymore. I even got to stump Missoula the other day. They said, we have never actually had that situation happen. She goes, let me know how that happened, you know, what finally shakes down, because we might learn from you. So even though I find degrees, especially in the bigger libraries, because they're also leaders and partners, and in some of our pilots, like Missoula, Kalispell, of course, you're amazing too, but we would not have the amazing partners if it wouldn't have been for Missoula really taking up those reins and trying to get it started way back when. And so I know that all of our library directors are very smart individuals, but I know that we do rely heavily on our big libraries. So I know that you guys have to be incredibly brilliant, but at the same time, and I'll shut up so I can hear from somebody, but do they teach those things like maintenance and infrastructure and dealing with those budgets? I mean, because I definitely could see, you know, definitely equivalent degree or experience, because some of those things I mean, degrees are incredibly important and I think they are definitely part of the package. But just like Michelle said, you know, water's coming in the library right now. There's a disaster. What do? I mean, how well sometimes can you be prepared other than experience? Thanks.
Thank you, Dawn. Mitch, did I see you unmute your mic there for a second?
You're watching that closely?
Good facilitators try to pay attention to that.
I definitely think that experience, I mean, you're going to gain experience whether or not you have the degree. But it's like, I mean, there's just some things that where, I mean, I wouldn't want an anesthesiologist that didn't have an MD, right? I mean, if the guy about to put me under decides, he says, oh yeah, you know, I've done it a bunch of times, so I don't have a degree, but I've done it a lot. I'm not that comfortable with that. So yeah, there's something beyond experience that getting the degree counts towards. And yes, Dawn, I totally agree with you. There was no HVAC class when I got my master's, but so yeah, there's a lot to learn just through sheer experience, but there is a lot of valuable stuff that only comes in school that allows you to like, for it all to coalesce in the real world. Education informs the experience. How about that? Put that on a coffee mug or something.
Thank you, Mitch.
Tracy, this is Brian.
Yeah, Brian, thank you.
So I guess in response to, I think Dawn asked some really interesting questions, and most MLS programs do offer courses, certainly in budgeting and management and whatnot. So that is addressed in those programs to a certain degree. I would just echo, I think, what Mitch said, that the MLS is the professional credential for a librarian. Working in a library does not make you a librarian. It's the credential that gives you that status. So I think it's an asset to these larger libraries to want their organizations to be led by a librarian. That would probably be in their best interests. And regarding the question of experience, I think it's very unlikely that it's very, very unlikely that any of these 8 libraries would hire somebody straight out of library school. They're going to be looking for somebody with considerable experience. So somebody with an MLS who is an appropriate and desirable candidate is going to come with many of those skills that they have learned on the job as well. So that's just some observations I would make for the task force to consider. And one other point I would just a sort of an anecdotal data point is that we have at Montana State University Library, we have several people with MLS degrees that are in staff positions. So they're classified staff. They are not in professional librarian positions because they want to work in libraries, so they're overqualified, and they would very much be interested in opportunities elsewhere in the state. We also have at least 2 staff members who are currently pursuing their MLS degrees. So just anecdotally, I really doubt that a supply of qualified MLS candidates would be a problem.
Thank you, Brian. Jenny, go ahead.
I just had Rebecca do some quick research and we can put this into meeting materials for your next meeting if that's helpful. I asked her to look back at the last 5 years of MLS students and MLS graduates. And according to the annual report from ALA, which is the accrediting body for the library schools, the last year's total count of master's students was 19,818 students. That's up from 16,720 in 2018. Last year, there were 7,249 graduates from those master's programs. That's up from 5,993 in 2018.
Thank you, Jenny. So it's been super helpful to kind of hear everyone's comments, because we've definitely pointed out some of the limitations that requiring this can place on a local organization, some of the importance of that experience piece, but we've also talked about how the education can help with the philosophy and just pulling everything together. So I guess, should we talk about, because one of the things that I've kind of been hearing and people have been mentioning is that equivalent degree and that work experience level. As I think about how to frame this question, I think what we are sort of asking is, as we think about a large library system, what knowledge, skills, and experience does the leader of that organization need to have, do we think, to just ensure that community members are providing the best service? So if you didn't even, it's so hard to do because you have this standard like sitting here in front of you. But if you were thinking about it from that perspective, like what skills, knowledge, and experience does a library director serving what is for Montana, a larger population size, what do they need? What's going to get the best service for their community members? And I think leadership for their staff as well.
Patience and a sense of humor go a long way.
You have both, Mark.
Yes.
I think directors not only leadership for their own library, but I would have to say I agree with what Dawn said is I relied heavily on advice from Susan and Gail in the larger libraries in Gallatin County, and relied very heavily on the Montana State Library as well for continuing education. So it's not just leadership in their own library, it's leadership as a community in the state, I would say.
That's a great point, Michelle. Just we're talking about how we have maybe leaned on these library directors and their education perhaps to support us in our work. Carmen, go ahead and let you ask your question.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we're tripping ourselves up by two things in this rule. One is that we're only focusing on the director. In my experience on my library board here in Kalispell, once you get to a certain size, you need an administrator at the top. What we still want is the knowledge and experience from people who have this degree, but maybe it should not be limited to just the director. And setting an absolute number of service population is also tricky, because what happens if from one census to the next you go over that absolute limit of people and your library director is not about to resign, so now you're no longer in compliance with the standard. That doesn't make any sense. So I think we need to not only look at the director, and we need to also consider this putting in an absolute number. Maybe we can find a different way to express the idea that a large library needs some more experienced, credentialed people in it, but maybe we don't need to define the exact role that these people need to have, or the exact title, to give the individual libraries more freedom in satisfying some kind of requirement that when you get really big, you become really professional and really good as a library.
Mark?
Oh.
Did you have your, I didn't know if you were gonna.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of maybe wait to see. Looks like Katie has her hands up as well, but I thought the points Carmen raised were really, there were ones that I've thought about too and kind of gone around in circles on, so I do have some thoughts on those, but I can reply to those after Katie speaks.
Okay, go ahead, Katie.
Thanks, Tracy. I just wanted to respectfully remind Carmen that being that this is, a public meeting and we've had discussions about having to recuse herself from some of these conversations relating to the standard because of her position on the Imagine If trustee board. And while I recognize her comments are super helpful in framing this discussion, I do believe there are other there's another trustee from the Imagine If board who can also provide some of these comments. I just don't want the commission or the state library to appear that we are biased or acting improper in some of these discussions, with Carmen being on the commission who's going to be voting on some of these rules as it relates to her position also within the board, if that makes sense. Just some caution is all that I ask as we proceed.
All right. Oh, I'll go ahead and let you speak, Carmen, and then we'll go back to the task force.
Thank you for that. And if I need to not comment, I will do that.
All right. So coming back to the task force members, and as I think about this, and I think about the comments that you've made, maybe that would be helpful. What we're talking about is like, what does the library director of a large library system need? And then kind of related to that, because it's the whole picture, what about the staff? Because the one concern about putting the requirement on staff versus the library director is it can put staff in kind of an odd position, I think, if they're the ones. So I would suggest that if you're going down that road or you're thinking that road, it would really need to be two different standards, I think, right? Like you're saying either you need to have X number of staff that have an MLS degree, and the administrator needs to have whatever you feel the administrator needs to have. I have heard pretty consistently a little bit of stress and anxiety about the idea of it basically being that the standard is just that you have staff with an MLS degree. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm probably not wording that great. But as you think about that and this whole question of what is it exactly that a large library system needs to provide excellent service, what thoughts come to mind? And maybe Mark, this is where you want to weigh in.
Yeah, Tracy, you definitely touched on sort of my, because I did think about it, and it does make sense in a certain way of, oh, okay, if you have a director that has, a bachelor's or a master's in public administration or other skills, knowledge, education that makes them an effective leader and a good fit for the community. And then you've got the, collection management librarian or something like that, that person has an MLS, and, children's librarian has an MLS or something. It makes sense, it made sense to me to a certain degree, but then when I did think about the awkward position that could put the dynamics of the staff and the director in a certain way, you would almost think those people should be making more than the director, because they're the ones helping the state meet the standards to be eligible for this state aid. And then that just kind of throws the whole hierarchy on its head. And I'm fine to, relook at hierarchies and the way things are done. But I think for the scope of this task force, I do think going down that road creates more complications and problems than it solves. So I sort of stopped doing that for similar reasons that you just elucidated, Tracy. On the topic of, the size of the population, Bitterroot is by far the smallest library that needs this MLS. And I think when I was hired in 2014, the population that we served in the central Bitterroot Valley, Ravalli County, was like 25,500 people. I mean, we were just barely over. And I think in that situation, if they'd tried and didn't have people with MLSs that applied, that does seem like a legitimate hardship, and maybe, there should be some way of addressing those situations. But I think, again, that probably is not going to apply to 7 out of these 8 libraries. I don't know how many libraries there are that have 23,000 people right now that might get over here in the next, 10 years when they do a census again. But I think looking at that as a way to kind of throw these whole standards out or to revise them significantly, it doesn't hold much water with me, because we're only talking about one library, basically, that would have affected in the last 10 years. And I can't imagine it's many that would be impacted in the next 10 years, given projected population growth. So that's, sort of my thoughts on those topics.
Thank you, Mark. That is a good question about how many libraries are on the cusp.
Yeah, I guess to just make it even more clear, I just don't want to spend us in any context of this task force trying to solve problems that don't really exist, to change the standards, you know, with some sort of hypotheticals that really aren't dealing with the facts at hand. And the facts at hand are the current standards do create hardships and difficulties for some libraries, and I think they can be addressed, you know, through this conversation by just sticking to sort of the facts and the basics of it, and not, you know, and looking at things, because like I say, the things Carmen brought up, I thought of those myself. And then when I thought about them a little more, yeah, I realized that they just weren't really getting at the heart of the matter, or that they just didn't have a statistically significant enough impact to really be worth, you know, figuring out. But I certainly could be wrong on that. That was just the conclusion I came to.
Well,
Lincoln County's next up, just so you know, and that's a ways down the road.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mitch. One thread that I have heard throughout this, though, is people are, I don't know if you're referencing an equivalent degree or not, but there has been a fair amount of conversation about the library director having some sort of more administrator, like more of that accounting, budgeting, just overall management of an organization. Are you landing on something, do you think, where you're like, saying, well, we definitely need to think about an equivalent degree and we should talk about that? Or do you have other ideas for how we reflect a library director of a library of this size? What kind of experience we think they might need to have?
I guess the way this is done, the way that it's worded, because this is how it's worded right now, correct? Okay. I like it being vague with that equivalent degree, because then that gives the board at those libraries some power, because they know their communities better than we do. Because, like, for instance, all I've gotten to deal with is infrastructure issues and maintenance. And when I saw that Billings Public Library, his degree is architecture, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, you know, what would have been absolutely amazing. I mean, obviously then I wouldn't have had the job I have now, but they know what the board knows what they need. If they need someone in accounting, I mean, of course you need those things, but, you know, I think that that gives the board in that area a little bit of leeway, so that we're not, you know, kind of staying in that whole what's best for that community, what's best for that area. Because I do agree that there needs to be some education for our bigger libraries, but that there could be a little bit of wiggle room for the boards.
Tracy, following up on that, what is the definition of an equivalent degree in this administrative rule, and who gets to decide what is an equivalent degree and what is not?
That is a great question, Brian. That in our state library staff interpretation has been that that's referring to some sort of master's in library or information science. So it has that library background, and that it was written that way to reflect the fact that not all masters of library science are called that. Some of them are masters of information science. And Jenny, feel free to weigh in on that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm. Mitch, did you have a?
I was going to say, it seems to me, irrespective of everything else, that maybe just saying hasn't Master of Library Science, Master of Library Information Science, and then we can argue about equivalent degree. And on that point, I would say the only thing that I can even imagine is really an equivalent degree is an MP.
Master of Public Administration.
Yeah.
That is my next question for the task force is, what do you define, what would you define as an equivalent degree if that is the road we end up going down?
And I should say, I'm not in love with that. I'm just saying that's, if I had to pick one other thing, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Dawn's point, or someone made the point about, they're probably not going to be hiring somebody right out of library school exactly. You'd be looking at a mix of education and experience. I think somebody hiring a fresh out of library school graduate over somebody that has a master's in history or even a bachelor's in English, but that has 15 years of library experience, some of it being a branch manager somewhere, so on and so forth. I think that is obviously going to be a more competitive candidate and probably a better candidate, in my opinion. So I think that sort of complicates it further, is, I don't want to go down this road of credentializing at the expense of getting people that could be really great fits. And sometimes great fits for libraries truly have unlikely backgrounds. And I think it's important to be sensitive to that. But yeah, with the standards, it is just sort of, yeah, I think a mix of equivalence of a degree and education. And again, I think, leaving the boards to decide what they think is best for their community is just one of the great things about libraries, and how they can be so responsive to their communities without having, just kind of one size fits all standards coming out of some, regional office or something like that. It's nice that there is that latitude, but I would be wary of kind of credentializing at the expense of viewing the candidates and, the kind of totality of what they might bring to the table. So yeah, this is really kind of tricky.
So as I kind of listened to you, Mark, it was almost like you were talking yourself out of being very strict about the master's in library science degree, and maybe allowing the board. Am I understanding that right? Like, are you?
Yes, I think so. And I apologize for being so wishy-washy about it, but I mean, I
no.
put a lot of thought into this, and I have, I think a reasonable perspective being a library director with an MLS at one of the smallest library that needs that standard. And, I've been in Montana for almost 9 years and just sort of seeing, the amazing work done by colleagues all over the state that, don't have that credential, but I think there's plenty that would do an absolutely outstanding job at bigger libraries if they so chose to, that don't have that credential. So yeah, one idea, I don't know if this is the right time, but I'll just throw it out and we can move it to another discussion. But I do value the certification that the state library provides. I think especially in recent years, it's just getting to be a more stronger, more robust, just a real great program. And I wonder if there's some sort of timeline we could put in of, directors certified within X amount of time by the library, if that could sort of get to where we're wanting to get to, which is not penalizing library boards for making what they might have felt was or they certainly felt was the best decision at that time for who to hire, but also not allowing it, I'll just be sort of candid here. My sort of fear with reducing some of these credentials, and it might be, from seeing it in, Eastern Kentucky, where I was from, there were a lot of, not a lot, but, and I don't mean to pick on Kentucky or any other places, but it can be sort of easy for somebody to just, end up in that position that might not really be well qualified for it just based on sort of who they know or that sort of thing. And I, don't want to kind of throw out, nepotism or corruption as being things that would keep me from wanting to do this, because that again is, as much of a sort of, distraction as the, population size worry. I recognize that might sound, silly for me to be not concerned about that, but concerned about this. But I would just worry of, sort of, oh, we'll just throw somebody from this city department that's been here for a while. I'm sure if they could run, Parks and Rec just fine, they'll do the library a great service, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I think there's maybe could be some way of working through this with the state library certification that would, and also honestly maybe allow people that are already working in Montana libraries that don't have that MLS, and it might not make financial sense for them to have it, but if they're certified and have experience, I would hate to see them not feel like they could apply to Bitterroot or, Butte or wherever if those positions were open and they felt, so inclined, because I think they do an outstanding job. But again, it's a super complex topic, and I'm sorry if I certainly confused myself, so I hope I didn't confuse anyone else.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please, Tom.
I'm here. Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize that last point, to be cautious about the value of credentialing in and of itself, and to call out the point earlier, the board knows what they need. So an alternative approach could be to let the trustees of those libraries decide based on their needs and the candidates that they can attract. I point out that from the excellent spreadsheet that Kara put together, that at least 5 states do not specify anything. And I think I came up with about almost 14 that kind of fit that description. And I'll just list them off here. I'm sure that Delaware, California, Hawaii, and Idaho were in that 5 group, and maybe a slightly more expanded definition of not requiring the MLS was this list: Ohio, Alabama, California, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Missouri, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Oregon, South Dakota, Wyoming, possibly Rhode Island. So that's another way to handle this, is through local discretion. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I thought about that as well, Tom, of just looking, and I was sort of surprised how many libraries didn't have this, any sort of credentials or standards for that. But then I got to thinking of, the Montana Library Network, and just the, both in the kind of official terminology as well as just what it exists at in serving our patrons is remarkable. I mean, the sharing group has been recognized nationally, partner sharing group in the Montana Shared Catalog as being just a remarkably effective and beneficial mode of library service to Montanans. And I think some of how we got there was by attracting people to this state that, or growing, sort of our own talent of, the people that went to get MLSs, through either the Cates fund that MLA provides and other things. And I think, I guess my sort of simple point to that line of thought when I went down it was, well, whatever we've done here so far has worked pretty dang well, because Montana libraries are remarkably awesome. I mean, I just believe that with every fiber of my being, that they're just something unique and something special and something great about them. And, whether it's, I don't want to do the whole conflating causation with correlation, but I think what we've done so far has worked really well. And I think it's important for us to look at it and to have these discussions. But I did sort of come back to that point of, just because other states have sort of diluted their qualifications, I don't know if that's the best thing for Montanans and Montana libraries. But I think figuring out some way of, of looking at sort of alternative equivalencies is worthwhile. And I think that, the discussions we've had thus far are, I don't know, I think we're kind of on the right track with here, and I just appreciate this discussion because it's really important. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Thanks, Tracy. There's one point that I think it bears making in this discussion, and that is the point that Tracy made when we started about tying state funding to public library standards as a way to ensuring that every Montanan has an opportunity to access quality library services. Because we are talking about state funding, I think it's important for us to have some ability to compare apples to apples when we're looking at what exists in the standards. And I think leaving a standard to say that it's up to the discretion of a library board, especially a library board that will change over the years, may put the state and the state library in a difficult situation in the future to be able to make that fair comparison when we are accountable to the state and the state expenditure of funds. So, I think this is a really important, robust conversation about what those requirements should look like. But from my perspective, I do think we need to have some kind of measurable requirement that libraries can be held accountable to because we are talking about state funds intended to provide a fair opportunity for library services across the state.
I'd like to agree with Jeannie. I think just the whole structure of the trustees, sometimes you have strong trustees and sometimes they're not as strong or they're newer. So I think having a state standard is very important to keep consistency and accountability.
That is a good point, Michelle.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Tracy.
Please, Dave.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points have been raised, and although I think that the MLS degree is a valuable degree, I don't think it should be exclusive. There are other states, as Tom has pointed out, that have other pathways to certification. And in talking to some people, if we, like Idaho has an ABLE commission, which requires 28 hours of coursework and evaluation to determine whether a librarian has adequate knowledge to be considered for higher level jobs. And also, if we had an initial certification in our own state as an alternative pathway or a work experience description that would at least put them in the arena. Obviously, these local boards, to Jenny's point, I mean, yeah, they do change, and that's just the point. They do change. They're not ossified. If people are unhappy with decisions made, they will change, and the repercussions of decisions will be felt. Those of us that are appointed by elected officials, we know that. So we feel that. I mean, I'm also curious, I mean, what do they do with foreign grads that might have some other degree from another country, and how do they get evaluated? In healthcare, we have equivalency exams that would qualify someone to be involved in care if they've been trained in another country. So I think that those types of things are worth looking at to give a more robust opportunity for a full spectrum of candidates and different experiences, depending on the library of what their individual local needs may require. And, you know, to the point of a large library, in the Smithsonian 2 years ago, they had a great article about the university or the Memphis Public Library that hired a city manager, to Mark's point, and you know, everybody was up in arms because they didn't have specific library training at all. And I'm not specifically advocating that either, but they went from nothing to national award-winning library in 5 years. Now, I know that's just anecdotal, but the point being that, you know, the mayor that appointed that person is also going to be on the hook for the outcome of the choices that are made locally. And I support local choices with using the state library as a resource for all of us to back up. And I've, you know, personally used Tracy's experience and knowledge base to help me with things along the way. So there's always backup for all of us. And we appreciate that. But I'm a big supporter of local control, which is probably obvious. So that's my thought.
That's a great discussion. Jeannie, yeah, please.
Well, I'm just curious. So on the lower level, you know, back in the day, everybody that had an English major got a library minor in education. So a lot of people, after they left teaching, went into public library, and that helped, I think, the library system for years. But I'm curious to know, there isn't such thing as a library minor available in the state of Montana anymore, is there?
I think there is, Jeannie, because I think Western has a program, and actually it's possible Missoula and Bozeman might as well. So yeah, there is still that opportunity to do education and then a library minor.
You know, I don't hear of it as much. And, you know, I'm just thinking that our little libraries out there, I think we are going to be going more towards somebody that doesn't bring that degree into our systems. And you know, like has been said here quite a few times this morning, is that we do look to the bigger libraries for their education and their knowledge, because I think out here in the little areas, we are going to be having to hire people that don't have a library minor, or maybe even any library experience. You know, housing is becoming so difficult in our tiny towns that you're pretty much going to have to hire from the workforce that's available. And it's good to have that education at the top if the rest of us are bumbling along out here. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I do know that among the gray-haired people that have retired in the years I've been here, you know, of who my friends at South Central Federation and other places, they are coming out of the school library situations and have brought their experience into public library. And a lot of them have retired in the 17 years I've been around.
Yeah, I think if I may, it seems like the task force is kind of, there's a few different issues. First, I think there is some division on whether or not a master's in library science degree should be required. There's some question about like the population level, and then there's members who say, well, it should be at the local level that you decide what skills and experience you need. There seems to be consensus that some sort of certification must remain, that is going to be useful. And then there's what I think, interestingly enough, several of you have brought up that I confess I did not think about, and that is that some of the smaller to medium-sized libraries lean on individuals with their MLS degree to help them provide better service at their level, which is something I had not thought about. I asked Kara and Genevieve to pull together for me a breakdown of the large 8 libraries showing their service area population, just to see if maybe there was a logical place where if we said we needed a library degree, maybe it would be different than the 25K. I don't know if this is useful to you. I was just curious about what would happen, because I remember when I looked to the state library other state libraries requirements, you know, some of them did do populations much lower than ours, and then others did populations much higher. So what you're seeing on the screen is the breakdown of the current service area population assigned to each of these libraries. I share it with you just in case it prompts some sort of, well, maybe this is the line versus something else. I guess at this point, would any task force members like to kind of weigh in on where we should go next? And I see that Jenny raised her hand. So while the task force members think about that, Jenny, why don't you go ahead and share your perspective?
I just asked Rebecca for one additional data point, and I don't know if she'll be able to get it for us at this meeting or if we'll need it for September, but I asked her to also then look at those populations of the libraries that are below 25,000 but near to 25,000. Mitch mentioned the Lincoln County libraries being the next closest. And I asked her to let us know which of those libraries might have directors who already have a master's degree. And then also how many libraries also have directors who have master's degrees that are below the $25,000 threshold. in case those are data points that are of interest to you.
And Kara actually did that too. And
Okay.
Lincoln and Park are next, and both of their directors have an MLS. And she also added Belgrade when she analyzed the greater area. Currently, the director does not have an MLS, but has mentioned that their replacement likely would be asked to have an MLS. So, task force members, would you like to hear public comment at this point, or would you like to propose some ideas for how we address this standard? I mean, we have the challenge of giving people local control, and then we have the challenge of as someone kind of said, if you look at it holistically, it is beyond just that individual library. And what does that mean? And what does that look like for us? So I guess my question for you, would you like to hear public comments and see if that helps? Or do you have any further discussion about this particular agenda item and which way we should perhaps consider going?
Hi, this is Michelle. I'd be curious on what some people's what other ideas on what an equivalency would be. A little more specific on that.
Yeah, okay. For the task force members to kind of discuss that a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. So task force members, you've been asked kind of a great question. What would be equivalent for you?
So Tracy, this is Brian, and I have been thinking about that very question. While I still think the MLS is the gold standard, one way I do appreciate the interest that some trustees might have in getting some other skill sets. And one thing that we could do potentially is to just change the wording of the standard a little bit to say people have a Master of Library Science or equivalent graduate degree. So that would allow them to hire people with, say, professional degrees like Masters of Public Administration or MBAs, or possibly a Master's in Education. So it broadens it out a little bit more that way. So I'm not necessarily in favor of that, but it's just one suggestion to consider.
Thank you, Brian. Do others? What are your thoughts on what's equivalent?
Well, I think MLIS should be in there explicitly.
Okay.
And not just counted as an equivalent of math.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please, Tom.
I'm here. Yeah, I like if the actions went this way, I see value in public administration, business administration, education, and information science, straight up digital science. But my first preference is to trust local, and that the state standards could be tied to any person who had been hired by that board of trustees. So that would be our tie for state funding, would be the approval of the local board of trustees. But if I don't win that persuasive argument, some of the things that Brian has just mentioned, maybe even expanded into the digital world.
Thank you for that.
What I would sort of think is, I like what Tom just, I appreciate the sentiment behind it. And the only thing that I would add too would be, approval by the local board of trustees and completion within 2 years of the administrative track in the Montana State Library continuing education program. Or maybe even, a year would probably be too quick to rush through that, but I don't know. I think it would be nice to do that. Just that way there is I just think what the state library has done is really valuable. And I think having a new director that might not have that experience complete that sooner rather than later would be good. If they're already working in a Montana library, sort of the cases I was thinking of earlier, where somebody's been in a Montana library for 15 years, they've got a bachelor's in English, and they want to direct, the Butte Library or Bitterroot Public Library, I think that is a much more qualified candidate than somebody fresh out of library school from Oklahoma. I mean, I just do. And they would already have that state library certification. So I think tying it both to the local control, but also the continuing education program by the state library is something that I would feel comfortable going in that direction. Yep.
Okay. Others on the equivalent piece?
I agree. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, ma'am. I've been speaking.
Okay. This is Dawn, and I agree with Mark. I think we need to tie in the certification and maybe not get in the reads of the equivalent degree and let maybe the board have a little leeway there. But just as Mark brought up, I will take it from a selfish point of view right now. When Bozeman was looking at hiring, you know, assistant director or whatever a couple of years ago, or one of their, maybe it wasn't even director, maybe it was like a manager or something like that. Even though I have all the experience that I have, and at that time, and it was right around when my library was going for, if we didn't get the 11 mills allocated, I would be out of a job. So I was looking at other libraries and things like that. And even though I have all this experience, I would have had to go to a place like Bozeman or Helena and start basically afresh and then start a degree. And there was no way, and like we've talked about housing, there was no way I could do that. And so the only ones that benefit from that are people from states that have a better, you know, like if you come from California and you have a, you know, before you had more means, so when they can sell their houses and move here, they're able to do that, where our local Montana librarians that have been in smaller libraries can't move up to the bigger libraries because, you know, when you work in the smaller libraries, you're getting paid less, which granted, I understand because, you know, I do only have my degree in psych. I don't have the MLS, but I never can get ahead to get that MLS. So that's, and I can't be the only one in this predicament.
Thank you, Don. Dave, were you going to speak?
Yes, I was going to, I feel strongly that we should have some alternative pathways to satisfy a state certification. And I mean, one idea was a more robust initial certification for librarians, especially those that did not have specific MLS degree. And so, or some other coursework or testing, or however we would evaluate, that they would be able to satisfy that, so that it within a period of time, so that you know, that there was a standard that was being met, although it was from multiple different pathways, just as the last lady mentioned her situation. We need to find ways to make it work in different environments. And the point here is that this state does not have a robust library science degree program on the ground. Yes, there are a lot of online programs, but there's not an on-the-ground program really that serves our needs. Thanks.
Yeah. So you can see I had Genevieve post some potential language, and I still think that, and that is actually a good sign that our committee's kind of torn on which way to go, because that means we're probably reflecting a lot of Montana people right now and being torn about which way to go. This seemed to be the language that folks were using to try and capture that idea of local control, and yet saying, but we want you to go whether it's called the library administration tract or it's something more robust, but there seemed to definitely be a desire to sort of require that they get their certification more quickly. Currently, if you are a library director, and even the large public libraries that have their master's in library science, you are asked to get your certification within 4 years of being hired, unless you have just recently received your master's of library science. So what I'm saying is the way it would currently work, if you did away with that Master's of Library Science degree or equivalent requirement, you're saying instead of getting 4 years, please do it within 2 years because of the nature of your job. I just put this language up here so that you can kind of react to it. Sometimes seeing the language is helpful. So we have I guess a contingent of you that seem like you're leaning more towards this one. And then we have a contingent of you that are leaning more towards saying, nope, libraries that serve over 25,000 need to have an MLS, MLIS, or equivalent graduate degree. So those are kind of the two standards. And I will type that in so Genevieve can add that second option. And are there any kind of reactions to these?
Tracy, while we think this over, could we hear public comment to help us with this so that we're also getting the public comment, please?
Absolutely. It seems like this is the time. So for those of you who have just joined us, the way we'll do this, just please raise your hand, and then you have 3 minutes to speak about this particular standard regarding the requirement that library directors that serve a population of 25,000 or more have a master's in library science degree. And Kara Orban is going to acknowledge you and be the timekeeper. So Kara, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tracy. And for those of you who have joined us more recently, if you are looking for the button to raise your hand in your taskbar, you will see a smiley face icon that says reactions. And if you click on that, there's a button in your menu that says raise hand. So you can use that to raise your hand and queue you up, and we will call on you. So please keep your comments to 3 minutes on this topic, and we are going to start with Matt Beckstrom. So Matt, please.
Good morning, or I guess good afternoon now. Thank you, Tracy, for a wonderful meeting, and members of the commission. You guys of the committee, you guys are doing a great discussion. I appreciate that. I do want to speak in favor of retaining some form of requirement for a master's degree, preferably library science or other equivalent degree. I want to say a lot of times people have brought up the point, local boards make the choice. And at the end of the day, the local boards are always going to make the choice. They can choose to hire who they want to. Once again, we bring up Flathead. Flathead did that. They made a choice. They hired the person they wanted to hire, and they made a choice. I know there was a repercussion for that. They lost their state aid, but at the same time, they had a choice. No one's taking the choice out of their hands. I guess one of the questions I would ask too is, how often has this really come up as an issue? Go back years. How many times has this really been a problem, or something that a local board has had an issue with? And then another thing that was brought up a lot was libraries who are maybe on the cusp of not having an MLS, but maybe we will be going over that amount. That's certainly going to happen from time to time, and I think that's something that library board with the state library could work out a process that wouldn't mean that person would lose their job. That would not be the decision of the state library to do that. That would be up to the local board. And speaking from someone who went to library school after I started working in libraries to become on my library track, my school track was in library administration. I want to become a director. And speaking as someone who's applied for jobs and not been denied because I don't have the experience, even though I have the degree. So I think that shows the way the system should work. For libraries over a certain size, you want someone who understands libraries. You want someone who understands what the inner workings of the way a library works and how they interface with the community, because it's different from other organizations. Could someone learn that? Oh, certainly. Okay, thank you. Could someone learn that? Sure, they could. And I think that's something to be considered as well. I also want to say that I've traveled around a lot. I'm with the ALA, of course, and with the Montana Library Association, and I travel around, talk to a lot of state libraries and a lot of libraries. Montana State Library, and our library system is a source of pride And we are admired by other states for how well we do this and how we stick to our guns when it comes to certifications and requirements. And this, now we're taking it apart. That doesn't make any sense. The systems work this well so far. I think we should stay with that. And you know, as far as local programs, there are no local library programs, but there are online programs. I did mine through online. It's a fantastic program. I just want everyone to consider, you know, 8 libraries. This effect. It's something we need to really talk about. But removing the requirement for a master's degree in library science or some other higher degree is not the best option. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, next we have Julie Edwards.
Thank you so much. I would also like to speak in favor of retaining the MLIS requirement, and I'd like to offer something that I haven't heard yet. The MLIS provides a foundation in ethics, including equity in service and access, intellectual freedom, intellectual property, the right to privacy, as well as how those build on and intersect with bedrock constitutional values, especially those of the First Amendment that protect the rights of creators and consumers of information. So that's something that I haven't heard mentioned in the conversation that I think is worth bringing forward to the task force to consider. These values find practical expression in codes of ethics. Librarianship is one of several professions, including some that have been mentioned here today: law, medicine, psychology, social work, with codes of ethics. So libraries are fundamentally about providing people the tools and services to read and learn freely without restrictions. They're houses of public learning, and in the spirit of that learning, I think it's imperative that librarians know not only what the professional values are, but why they matter. And part of the purpose of the MLIS is to provide a strong foundation in these values. So I would consider asking the task force this question: is there any other specific profession that requires a master's level professional degree and is governed by a code of ethics that we would say in large systems is able to be done by someone without that education? I think Mitch brought up a great point. Could you envision a law firm that is run by a paralegal with lawyers underneath that person? So those are my comments. Thank you for hearing them. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie. Is there anybody else who would like to offer comment on this item?
Thank you, Kara. So, and we have, received some public comment on this item that came through electronically that we are posting and we'll share with you. People seem to be coming down on having some kind of degree, either specifically a master's of library science, and they've pointed out some of the things that Julie and Matt mentioned, or at least having a business degree or something like that, given the nature of the complexity of the job. We will definitely share public comment with you before your September meeting. If you are ready, however, we could take action on this item, or we could choose to wait until September if you want to give feedback, further feedback from the public. So your options are: hold off on this one, continue to gather feedback, review that feedback, and make a decision in September, or take action on this item and make a motion, whatever feels right to you, whether it be the first one or the second one. Those are kind of your options. And Jenny, I will let you weigh in.
Just one question. I know that there's a survey asking people for feedback. When are those survey responses due?
I think we set a deadline. Do you remember, Kara, what the deadline was? I meant to look that up. I think it was August 31st is my memory.
End of the month.
End of the month. Yep. And we have gotten over 100 responses to that survey so far.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Tom.
Would you please give some details on the library administration track?
Yes. So with the library administration track, and Kara, do you mind finding our website link that has the details for the library administration track and posting it in chat? So she'll do that, but very briefly, all library directors, public library directors are required to earn 60 hours every 4 years, and they are required to do the library administration track. And that track requires that a certain number, I think it's 20, but Kara's going to pull that up for you. A certain number of the hours must be in the subject area of library administration. So the way our certification program is currently works, there's library administration, collection management, and technical services, library services to the public, and technology. And so that first library administrator track does require, so it's 30 credits in their initial certification, and then they can get 30 credits in any of the other 3 categories that they want. After that initial certification, we actually allow the library director to choose what is best for them. Given their circumstances, because some of the large library directors actually mentioned to us that they need mostly library administration, while some of the smallest of libraries are like, we really need more library services to the public or so forth. So what you see on the screen is what is currently required. They can get those credits in a variety of ways. They can get it through training that the state library offers. They can get it through training that their local government offers, the local government center. They can actually use university classes if they wish. They can also get training from the Montana Library Association or other organizations that provide training.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments?
Hi, this is Michelle. I would just say that putting it down to 2 years for the continuing education, I think as a new director, you really need to prioritize the library and not necessarily can prioritize the continuing education. So I think on my side anyway, that would be too short of a time frame. I already am certified in that. I worked on that before, but I just see as a new director that 2 years would probably be too short of a time.
Okay. Other comments or questions? I would say, Michelle, too, though, the larger libraries have more staff, so the director actually can maybe prioritize. We have had large library directors that got their certification within that 2 years. I'd have to look up the data, but I know that's true of Imagine If. So would folks, I mean, given, just I think our own struggles in this committee and also some of the public comment that's out there, would you be okay with waiting until September and we'd share the survey results, we'd share any public comment? What do task force members think of that?
I think we definitely should wait. I couldn't vote on this in any way without having all that public comment taken into consideration. Just wouldn't feel right to me to invite people to take a survey and then not really have time to fully mull that over before looking at this. And I think that's, to me, that's just an illustration of just how torn I feel about this. I mean, there's a lot of kind of competing interests and competing values at stake. I think having, the points that Julie raised were very important. I think in a certain way, some of that, ethics and freedom of information and those deep professional values can be achieved through the, Montana State Library certification process. But I also get where, the sentiment behind that. On the other hand, I don't want to see the MLS requirement keep very good, kind of homegrown, for lack of a better term, Montana library directors from being able to move up in this state and do wonderful things, with colleagues that they formed relationships with, and they get in a library that they can have a bigger impact on. I think that's a really great thing. So yeah, I definitely would want to not do anything till I've read all the public comment.
Okay. Katie, go ahead.
Thank you. I was considering all the public comment that is
still out there. I think that's important to consider when we're trying to get into actually crafting something that will then again go to public comment. But my other comment was just when we're talking about putting some of this back in the local boards, I just really, and we're tying state aid funding and things of that nature, as Jenny has already talked about, we need to be very cautious about how we frame that in allowing local boards to kind of be different throughout the state could potentially open up the library to some liability and when we're talking about state aid and, well, this library did this and their local board, you know, I recognize they approve that, but a different local board has a different opinion. There's just a little extra liability, and I would just caution the task force, and if that's a rule that is the majority that goes forward, I will also caution the commission to something that isn't a little more detailed in what those requirements are going to be on the local board, aside from just the following the library administrative track in a certain time frame, whatever that time frame may be. But I would just really caution that you still think about, even if you give it to the local board, to have more say, limiting that to an extent, just to make sure we do have a uniform standard across the state.
That's helpful. Thank you, Katie. Yes, Tom.
In light of that and Jenny's cautions, could we ask the staff to investigate some of the states that do not require MLS, but probably still dispense state aid, how they do it in a defensible manner?
Okay, that's a great question. So my sense is that the task force would be perfectly okay with seeing what the public comment is, researching these questions that you have raised about other states and how they handle it. And I think there were a couple of other questions I collected as well, just about the ease of getting the MLS and so forth. Is everyone okay? Just thumbs up. Are you okay with holding off on this one and moving to the next agenda item? Do you just want to?
I am.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. All right. Seems like there's consensus. So we will hold off and see what the public has to say and do some more research. We are down to the last item here. So is everyone okay? Can we actually plow through this and maybe be able to end our meeting a little early? I'm taking that as a yes. Silence is going to be agreement.
So I don't have to do other things.
Okay. All right. So this one actually is coming from state library staff as we wrestle with the deferral process. So the way this works is a library will receive a form that basically has the public library standards listed, and it will ask them, yes or no, do you meet these, or not applicable if it's related to the size of the library. If they say no, we ask them why they are unable to meet the standard. Why is it a hardship? And what is kind of their plan for addressing the standard? What we have observed in reviewing these requests is that sometimes the libraries actually they missed it, and they're going to be able to comply with the standard actually before Jenny even reviews the deferral. Sometimes their compliance plan actually is a good compliance plan, but it takes time. And so, for example, maybe their library isn't ADA accessible, but they really, really want to have their library front door be ADA accessible, but they know they're not going to be able to do that in a year. So, Jenny's always worked with the libraries, but the system as it currently exists kind of almost says you have to apply every year for a deferral. Yet we know that there are certain standards that take multiple years to comply with. And then we have the question of, well, what do we consider a hardship and what is not a hardship? And the suggestion was made that maybe we should define what is not considered a hardship. Then that way state library staff can try to fairly apply their deferral requests and how they process them. So really the current standard is pretty broad. It just says, you'll say, why is it a hardship? What's your plan? And then the state librarian reviews it and decides. And we're suggesting that it might be helpful for the librarians and certainly for state library staff to put some clarity on that. And Jenny, I'd like to just kind of ask you, as the person who basically has to review all of these, do you have anything you would like to add that the task force might find helpful?
I think you described the current need well. Again, this is just about bringing clarity around expectations so that every library knows that the state library is reviewing the annual reports and considering them fairly and consistently. And I hope too that by more clearly defining a process or a plan for meeting the standards, when, as Tracy described, meeting a standard might take a period of time, that we can do that definition and create a plan in a way that's really helpful and productive for the libraries themselves. And then, like I said, holding all libraries to that same standard.
Thanks, Jenny. So I'm trying to think where is easiest to start. I guess I'll just start at the top. Is the current practice a fair definition of hardship, which we try to describe in the paragraph above, why or why not? And if it isn't a fair definition of hardship, then what do we not consider a hardship? So why don't we start there?
And Tracy, I don't know if the task force, if it would help to have some examples, if that would help, let me know.
Would that be helpful, task force members? I mean, how would you like to tackle this one?
I would like to hear some examples, if Jenny would share them with us.
Sure, Dave. Just some random examples from the last several years. Some of the standards that a library might not meet that Tracy described, where by the time a library submitted their annual report and I have a chance to review them, and just for a little bit more information, libraries have to submit their annual reports by July 24th, and I have until October 1st to review them. And I usually let all of the reports come in, so I have a chance to review them kind of all at once. So, sometimes it might be that a library board just hasn't met for a couple of months, and so they needed to update their bylaws, for example, and they hadn't met, and by the time I actually review their annual report, they've met and the bylaws have been approved, and they meet the standard. So that would be an example where, maybe having a grace period for something like that would help. They can report that they aren't currently meeting the standard, but plan to meet it within 6 months, and then we would check back with them and determine whether or not they then met that standard after a grace period. Other kinds of standards where libraries have lost their funding or we've not granted waivers include situations like the situation at the Imagine If Library with the current library director, or as Michelle said, their library director previous to her chose not to continue with the certification program. Those were examples where a library was choosing to not meet a standard based on their local situation, not necessarily because of a pre-identified hardship. And again, because this isn't identified in any kind of administrative rule, we've been working with agency legal services to get their best guidance on how to address these kinds of situations, and having something in administrative rule would just ensure that both for the state library and importantly for libraries, that you know that we're applying the same process as consistently as possible.
Yeah, Jenny, I guess, oh, sorry, I
go
was
ahead.
just
No,
gonna,
please, Katie, go.
yeah, I think when, you know, and I've spoken with the staff about this, it can be difficult to try and hypothetically think of what would or would not apply down the road because situations change. And I kind of suggested that maybe there are a set of circumstances where the task force and, you know, down the road, the commission would be comfortable saying, you know, in these situations, we know this does not count as a hardship, so that we're not limiting what may be a hardship for one library as much as we're trying to say point blank, this will not qualify as a hardship. The easy example, as we've already talked about, is if the library itself or the trustees self-impose and decide to not follow a standard, should that count as a hardship, or should that point blank say, nope, not a hardship? If it might be easier to look at it that way rather than trying to define what is a hardship, it might be easier to take the approach, what isn't a hardship, or I guess maybe think of those things that if you don't want to in the rule state this does not constitute a hardship, at least framing it in your mind that way is thinking how you'd want to define hardship. I don't know if I made that any easier, but kind of, are there things that you wouldn't want to consider a hardship that might help frame what it might be easier down the road to consider a hardship if you want to define hardship, or is it easier to define what doesn't constitute as a hardship so you're not trying to pigeonhole yourself down the road? I don't know if I helped clarify that at all.
Thank you, Katie. I think you're basically trying to point out you can't think of every contingency. So how do we word this in a way that's fair and yet clear? And that is the challenge with standards. Go for it, Mitch.
I would say that I totally agree about defining things that way or undefining them by exclusion rather than including. But one thing, a hardship would be due to factors out of the library's control. That would be, I think, no self-imposed hardships. The tornado wrecked it, great. If you decided to tear down the wheelchair ramp because you didn't like the way it looked, well, I don't think that's
Would it be helpful if you had language to react to? I go back and forth on that because sometimes I feel like when I give people language, they feel like they have to go down that road, and that's not my intent. I really am curious about what's best for the libraries and Montanans. But in this particular case, would it help you as a task force if you had some language that you could see, some potential language for the standards?
This is Michelle. Jeannie, I remember it wasn't just hardship that you did waivers for. If I recall correctly, it was before my time here at the library that you did waivers for West Yellowstone because the director indicated that he was going to retire soon. So you granted waivers for a few years. So if there's something besides a hardship, if we put some kind of language in there, something not just a hardship, as a definition, I think that would help. It just reflects, because hardship sounds like beyond your control, but there's nuances that I find that you guys were pretty flexible with.
Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
How about hardship or extenuating circumstances?
Mm. We'd still have to define, we still would have to define what the hardship and the extenuating services are.
Well, I think the reason we've always requested that libraries answer the question why is because it does make a difference. You know, we really recognize that every library is different and all of you have challenges. And so knowing your why for needing that deferral is very helpful for really allowing us to do what we want to do, which is ensure Montanans get good library service and you receive the funding from the state. And so that's why we've always included it. Thoughts, reactions?
Hi, Tracy. I wanted to make a comment just on,
Yeah,
the
please.
waiver process and the compliance plan features are something that, impact my thinking. And even if a hardship is quote unquote self-imposed, the desire to meet standards over a period of time, I'm not sure what the best strategies to allow, whether it's an ADA ramp or whatever feature, how that can give Jenny some guidance and the rest of us an understanding of how the system would work would be helpful. And I don't have specific language at this time that I could offer you, but those are things that we've had discussions on locally. So clarification in that area for all of us, I think, might be helpful.
So maybe it would be helpful to have some language to react to. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, Dave? That
I don't think that would be inappropriate. I think having something to work off of might be helpful, at least for myself.
okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Tom.
question, is this language that you're thinking of, would it consist of a list of ironclad standards that cannot be violated and still maintain qualification to receive the funds? So would you be talking about a list in this proposed language?
So what I would be, no, yes and no. The way we have handled the deferrals in the past is it's a separate section of the administrative rules process. And so the administrative rules say, okay, in order to receive state funding, libraries need to meet these public library standards, and it has the list. And then it says, if your library is unable to meet any of these standards, please explain why it's a hardship and what your plan is for coming into compliance. And then that goes to the state librarian for her to review and respond to. What I think I am suggesting and proposing some language is to just give you as a task force a possible deferral section that would lay out maybe something like, if your library is out of compliance with a standard and will be unable to meet it before, say, December 31st, then why are you out of compliance? What is your plan for meeting it? And then would say something about, your compliance plan. Let's just use the ADA ramp because that's kind of a nice, easy one. If you really feel like you need to have ADA accessible front doors in the front of your building, it's going to take you 3 years, and that's because you need to raise the funds, find the architect, get the contractor, then that would become your compliance plan, and all you would have to do in succeeding years is just report on how you've done. Like, we've raised 50% of the funds, we've begun the process of working with the architect, whatever that might be. And so what we would do in doing that is by having that grace period, we would simplify it in a way for the libraries, because then they're not having to complete this form for something that they're going to get done before the year ends. And for those who have a more complicated situation where it takes multiple years to address the standard, they only have to do the compliance plan once and then just do updates as part of it. That is sort of some of the language I was thinking of including, and I just thought maybe if I wrote it down, it would help you as a task force go yes or no. That doesn't totally address what I think is kind of the kernel of it, which is what is not a hardship. And I recognize that.
I think Dave made an interesting observation in that, this might not be universal, but if there is an intent that can be articulated through a compliance plan, that could be an indication that the library is facing a hardship or circumstances, extenuating circumstances, as Brian said, that need to be addressed, and that they have a plan to address them, as opposed to a conscious decision that a library is making to not meet a standard because of a local situation that they choose not to.
That is a good point.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think my preference is to stay with the existing system, but thanks.
Okay. Just keep it as is. Any other thoughts? Reactions to what Tom is suggesting?
Yeah, I think keeping it as is, it seems to have served us well enough, because it's hard to plan for every contingency and every change. And I think we'd sort of just be chasing our tail in another 2 or 3 years if we tried to change much of it as is. So yeah, it'd be fine to leave it.
I would have to say it's good the way it is as well. I think it offers good faith.
Dawn or Jeannie or anyone else on the task force I haven't heard from? Joy, do you have any reactions?
I'm fine with it as it is.
Okay.
This is Dawn. I'm also fine as is.
All right. So it sounds to me like the consensus is to keep the existing standards as is. I'm not really sure, Jenny, if we need a motion on that, but should I just have them vote on it just so that when we go to the commission, we could say their recommendation?
Right, exactly. That's
okay.
what I would recommend.
Okay, so would a task force member like to make a motion to keep the current deferral section as is?
I'm not sure I'm authorized to do so, but I would make that motion as a substitute for Commissioner Hall.
Yes, Tom. I've just been assuming that you get to have the vote, so works for me. So motion by Tom to keep the current deferral section as is. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
And seconded by Brian. And then do we have any, do we have any further discussion and or public comment? Oh, I forgot to call for public comments. So if anyone, any remaining members of the public would like to comment on this one, please do raise your hand. All right, hearing no public comment and no discussion from the task force members, all those in favor of keeping the current deferral section as is, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Anyone wish to abstain? All right, motion carries. Okay. So we are down to basically any other business and announcements. So just to kind of summarize what we covered today, you took action on the following items: defining which state payments require compliance with public library standards, amending the rules to include accredited tribal college libraries, amending the library budget standard, and keeping the current deferral process as is. You made the decision, wise one I suspect and think, to relook at the formula to get some more information about how to best include any accredited tribal college libraries in the current state aid formula. And you also wish to see the public feedback and have state library staff complete some research to help you with the standard of library directors serving populations over 25,000 having a Master's of Library Science or equivalent degree. So those two items will be brought back to you in September. Next steps in the process is I will kind of type up the notes on what you've done so far. We have a couple of public hearings. This is a standard practice that we've had. We've kind of just put that out there and asked people in the library world who are going to have to carry this work out to respond. And we also, of course, would welcome any comments from any members of the public on your recommendations. And then we will share that information and feedback, the public library survey feedback about the Masters in Library Science and state library staff research with you before your September meeting. And then at your September meeting, we'll have you take action on those two standards that are remaining, and then ask you if you want to make any changes to the work you have already done. So that is kind of the next steps in this process. Are there any other questions or any other public comment about anything within the jurisdiction of this task force? All right. I want to thank everyone today. You did a great job. I really appreciated your conversation and your feedback. It's very helpful to me. You certainly made me think about some things I had not considered in looking at this. So thank you so much for your time today. And with that, I would, may I just move to adjourn this? I think I can, right? Genevieve, my parliamentarian. All right. In that case, then thank you, everyone. And we will adjourn this meeting as of 12:42 p.m.
Thank you all.